Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Charlotte Mulhall. In March 2005, a gruesome murder occurred in Ireland when a fisherman made a disturbing discovery in a canal. He initially thought he had found a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was part of a human leg wearing a sock. He immediately contacted the police. The subsequent investigation revealed many details about this infamous case. The Mulhall family lived in South Dublin, Ireland, consisting of parents John and Kathleen and their 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons. The family faced challenges related to alcohol and substance abuse. Both parents drank regularly, and their arguments often became loud and violent, all in front of the children, despite their troubled marriage. John and Kathleen remained together for 27 years. However, by the early 2000s, when their children were grown, they decided to divorce due to financial issues, but continued to live together. At first, it seemed that family life was getting better. However, in 2002, Kathleen introduced her new boyfriend, Farah Swaleh-Noor, who was 14 years her junior. Kathleen's ex-husband, John, felt uncomfortable having a stranger in his home, especially since Farah was now sharing a bed with Kathleen. In response, John decided to leave and move in with his girlfriend. Unfortunately, his new partner soon kicked him out of the house, and he spent a year wandering around Dublin before returning home. Luckily for John, by that time, Kathleen and Farah had moved into a rented flat in another area of Dublin. Farah arrived in Ireland in December 1996 under the false name Shalila Salim. He claimed to be from Somalia and said that his entire family had died in the Civil War. In fact, he was from Kenya and his family still lived there. Farah had a record of minor crimes, and when his deception was discovered, he faced deportation. He successfully appealed the decision. In March 1999, he married a Dublin resident, and they had a child together, which enabled him to obtain Irish citizenship after naturalization. Farah left his wife and began living a chaotic life, relying on odd jobs and petty theft to make ends meet. Farah had a violent past, including an incident in which he abused a mentally disabled Chinese woman, although she bore him a son. Farah escaped punishment for his actions. Reports suggest he harbored a deep hatred for women. In 2002, Farah met Kathleen, and they began a tumultuous relationship. Both were unemployed and relied on odd jobs to make ends meet. Their shared love of alcohol initially bonded them, but over time, their difficult personalities led to frequent arguments, which Kathleen's children often witnessed. Kathleen's eldest daughter, Linda, was born in 1975. She dropped out of school at a young age. By the age of 24, she had 4 children and often forgot the names of her boyfriends due to a series of short-lived relationships. Linda also served a short prison sentence for theft and struggled with alcohol and drug addiction. Linda's younger sister, Charlotte, had her own legal troubles, with around 7 convictions for theft, property damage, escort services, and other misdemeanors. Like Linda, Charlotte also struggled with serious addiction issues. The other siblings also had their own legal problems, and none were considered positive role models. On Sunday, March 20, 2005, Linda invited Charlotte to her apartment. While they were talking in the kitchen, Charlotte suggested that they start celebrating her birthday, which was the next day. At first, Linda refused because she had been abstaining from alcohol for 3 weeks to regain custody of her children, who were in a shelter. However, the temptation to drink became too strong, and half an hour later, they opened a bottle of hard liquor to start the birthday celebration. A few hours later, the sisters decided to visit their mother and her partner, Farah. When they called their mother, they found out that Kathleen and Farah were at a bar in central Dublin. Without hesitation, the sisters joined them. It turned out that Kathleen and Farah had been celebrating St. Patrick's Day for 4 consecutive days. After meeting Linda and Charlotte at the bar, the family did not stay long and decided to continue celebrating at a nearby park. However, Farah got into an argument with some locals, forcing the family to stay out of trouble and decide to go home. The four of them returned to Kathleen and Farah's rented apartment. They prepared food and set the table to celebrate Charlotte's upcoming birthday. When everything was ready, Farah fell asleep to lift Farah's spirits. Kathleen slipped a pill into his drink. Although the ecstasy worked, things did not go as they had expected. A moment later, Linda, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly felt Farah caress and squeeze her legs. Then he put his arm around her waist and whispered inappropriate words into her ear. At first, Linda did not want to cause a scandal, so she reminded Farah to behave after witnessing Farah's inappropriate actions. Linda openly asked him to take his hands off her, realizing that the situation was escalating. Kathleen and Charlotte began to insult Farah and asked him to behave properly. The argument quickly turned into a fight. Then, Farah grabbed Kathleen, causing her to scream for help to her daughters. In response, Charlotte pulled a knife from her pocket and attacked Farah, seeing her sister Charlotte in danger. Linda rushed to the pantry and grabbed a large iron hammer under the influence of alcohol. Linda lost control of her actions. Soon, the floors, walls, and rooms were in chaos. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, Kathleen, sat in a chair, holding a glass and watching her two daughters attack Farah. Eventually, she grew tired of the commotion and turned her attention to the television, where an entertainment program was playing. After the altercation, the sisters began to understand what had happened, and panic set in. Kathleen stepped in to help and gave Linda and Charlotte a plan for how to dispose of Farah's body. Kathleen said that no one would charge them with murder if Farah's body was not found. So Linda and Charlotte spent the next 5 hours in the bathroom processing the body. During this time, Kathleen took a nap. When Kathleen woke up, she found 7 black plastic bags in the hallway. She called her ex-husband John to tell him about the nightmare that had unfolded in their rented apartment. John was skeptical and did not believe her at first. However, when he arrived and saw the scene from the front door, he realized it was no joke. He declared that he would not participate and went home. After a short break, Kathleen and her 2 daughters began a thorough cleaning of the apartment. They used brooms and several gallons of bleach to meticulously wipe down every surface. At noon on March 21, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte left the rented apartment, each carrying a sports bag containing black trash bags. They walked to the nearest river channel and, unnoticed, threw 6 black bags into the water. The women then went to a restaurant. Afterward, they took a bus for about an hour to the city center. Once there, they stopped at a large store, browsed several areas, withdrew money from an ATM, and went to a park. In the park, they dug a shallow hole with a knife and buried the last bag. They eventually threw the knife and hammer into a nearby pond before returning home. Over the next few days, Kathleen and her daughters focused on cleaning the rental apartment. Kathleen bought a large amount of cleaning supplies. She later admitted that there was a terrible, nauseating smell in the room that no cleaning product could remove. Kathleen and Charlotte coped with the smell by drinking and using drugs to forget it. However, Linda was very distressed, crying constantly and unable to calm down. 10 days later, one of the bags that Kathleen and her daughters had thrown into the Dublin Canal floated to the surface. A local fisherman discovered it and quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they drained the canal, and divers searched the area, eventually finding 6 black bags containing the man's body. A forensic expert determined that the man had suffered 28 injuries due to the brutal nature of the case. The police initially speculated that he may have died during a witchcraft ritual, but later ruled this theory out after consulting with experts. The police knew they needed to solve the case by identifying the victim. However, the DNA database did not have any matches for the body. Therefore, officers decided to take a different approach. They shared descriptions and photos of the items found in the victim's bag through social media. Among these items, was a torn T-shirt with the logo of an Irish football club. This shirt helped identify the victim as Farah Swaleh Noor. As one of his old friends from Somalia recognized it, this friend also mentioned that Farah had been missing for several weeks and had stopped answering calls. Police discovered that Farah had been living with a girlfriend named Kathleen Mulhall for the past few years. This information prompted further investigation. Samolit received a cash reward for helping to locate Kathleen, while two others, Linda and Charlotte, were brought in for questioning. All three denied any involvement, and the police had no evidence to charge the women. So they were released the same day. In July 2005, one of Kathleen's sons, who was serving time in prison for a traffic violation, informed a guard that his mother and sisters had killed Farah. He claimed that during a prison visit, Kathleen had confessed to the crime to him. Following this revelation, the police searched Kathleen's apartment and discovered traces of Farah's blood. In August 2005, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte were again questioned at the police station. They maintained their innocence, and the interrogation lasted 12 hours. Kathleen and her two daughters, Linda and Charlotte, were then released. During this time, Linda, who was extremely remorseful, called the police at the end of August and confessed to the crime, leading them to the park where they had buried a black bag that eventually contained Farah's body. However, it is believed that the black bag was unearthed and moved to another location shortly after Linda's confession. In September 2005, Kathleen Mulhall fled to England. In December 2005, Linda and Charlotte were arrested and charged with murder. Shortly afterward, their biological father, John, who was looking after the four children on his own, died. It is believed that he had nothing to do with the crime. Linda and Charlotte's trial began in October 2006, with Linda facing a charge of manslaughter and Charlotte charged with attempted murder. During the trial, both women claimed they acted in self-defense, maintained their innocence, and stated that they were trying to protect their mother. After a brief deliberation, the jury found Charlotte Mulhall and Linda Mulhall guilty. The judge sentenced Linda to 15 years in prison, while Charlotte received a life sentence. It was reported that both sisters had exhibited poor behavior while incarcerated in a women's prison in Dublin. One day, Linda injured her hand and spent several weeks in the hospital. Charlotte attracted media attention after a photograph was released of Charlotte attacking a male prisoner. The incident led to increased security measures at all prisons in Ireland, and Charlotte was subsequently transferred to a higher security facility in Limerick. Kathleen Mulhall's story began when she fled Ireland in September 2005 and assumed a new identity in the UK. However, in January 2008, a reporter discovered her location and reported her to the police. As a result, Kathleen was forced to return to Ireland, where she faced numerous charges. She confessed to helping her daughters dispose of their bodies and clean their apartment. In May 2009, Kathleen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released after serving only 2 years. After her release in October 2011, she returned to the UK and moved in with her son, James. At that time, James's family consisted of his 6 children and the 4 children of his sister, Linda. He adopted Linda's children after she was arrested. After Kathleen arrived, tensions rose between James and his live-in girlfriend, eventually leading to an incident in which he assaulted her and was subsequently imprisoned. Kathleen later suffered severe kidney failure and underwent an organ transplant in Dublin. She now lives in her hometown, where she continues to receive treatment. Linda was released early from her sentence that same year. She now lives with her children and her new partner. Linda does not give interviews to journalists. In a recent statement to the media, she said, "She have served my sentence. Let she live in peace after all. This is she personal life, and it is none of your." Since March 2023, Charlotte has been allowed to leave prison for 1 day. Under close supervision by guards, she may soon be eligible for parole. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deanna Laney. Deanna Laney was known for being quiet, uncommunicative, and calm. She lived in a small town with a population of just 600. She was deeply religious and a member of the Pentecostal church, where her relative was the pastor, and she participated in the choir. People who knew Deanna were shocked by her actions, as no one suspected she might have mental health issues. She always appeared to be a loving, exemplary mother and wife. However, outside of the church, the family lived quite isolated from society. They had no close neighbors, and their home was situated on a large plot of land, distant from other houses. They chose to raise their children in the countryside, homeschooling them instead of sending them to public schools. Deanna, a housewife, is responsible for her children's education. This isolation likely contributed to others not noticing any problems with the seemingly loving mother. Their family lived in isolation from the outside world, to the point that only a small group of family members knew the details of Deanna's mental health problems. On the evening before Mother's Day, May 10, 2003, a 911 call was made from Northeast Texas. A calm female voice clearly told the dispatcher that she had killed her children. The dispatcher kept talking to the caller and guided her to the emergency service location. When police officers arrived at the small house in Chapel Hill, they identified it as the home of Deanna and Dale Laney. Inside, they found Deanna in pajamas, seemingly just woken up, looking confused as the police continued their investigation. Officers continued to search the area and eventually found the woman who had called 911. She was nearby in a small grove, wandering barefoot, in white pajamas covered in blood, still talking to the emergency dispatcher. It was 39-year-old Deanna Laney. She calmly informed the police that her son's bodies were behind the swings in the yard. The officers went to the spot she described and discovered the bodies of 6-year-old Luke and 8-year-old Joshua. Both boys were lying on the ground in their underwear, their heads so severely mutilated that they were unrecognizable. The children had suffered fatal head injuries. Experienced detectives said this was one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever encountered. However, there were only 2 bodies. Officers were told by Dale that they had 3 children. Despite this, they continued searching for the youngest child. They entered the house and checked the children's room, where they discovered 1-year-old Aaron. He was still alive but severely injured, covered in blood, and a pillow was over his face. Aaron was immediately taken to the nearest children's hospital and then moved to the Dallas Medical Center for treatment of the terrible injuries caused by his mother, Deanna. Deanna was arrested, but she was unable to give a statement due to mental health issues. She claimed that God commanded her to kill her sons. She used stones to attack the heads of the 2 children, Joshua and Luke. Although the youngest child, Aaron, was seriously hurt, but the boy survived the incident. Investigators questioned Dale, suspecting that he might have heard or seen something, as the children were likely to scream during the attack. However, he was bewildered and didn't understand how his wife could commit such acts. He mentioned waking up that night to the cries of Aaron, which was unusual since the child typically slept soundly. He went to the nursery and found his wife standing over the crib in the dark. She reassured him that everything was all right and that she was just soothing the baby. Trusting her, he went back to bed and slept throughout the incident. He only realized the true nature of his wife's actions when it was too late. Police were unable to learn of any problems Deanna was experiencing from Dale or her relatives. It was later discovered that she was hallucinating, which made her intend to kill her child, supposedly under God's influence. Among all the friends and family interviewed, only her sister, Pam, noticed changes in her behavior. Recently, Pam informed investigators that she started acting differently. During this time, she barely ate and lost noticeable weight. She spent all her free time reading the Bible and occasionally said strange things. However, Pam didn't think much of it. After discussing Deanna's behavior with Dale, she dismissed her concerns and felt reassured. The police observed Deanna's erratic behavior while she was in custody. Her condition visibly changed before their eyes. She would sometimes collapse to the floor in a fetal position and crying. Then she might stand up and start singing church hymns. At times, she seemed to realize what she had done, resulting in a vacant stare. It was clear that she was at a high risk of ending her own life, so the police followed protocol. Deanna was placed under special supervision to prevent self-harm. This was necessary to conduct a psychiatric evaluation, which later took place in a psychiatric clinic. The doctors questioned Deanna, and she smiled as she recounted her actions toward her sons. She laughed sincerely, believing she had fulfilled God's will. She was convinced her children would be resurrected, but she felt the youngest, Aaron, should have died too. She regretted that this did not happen, as she believed it meant she had failed to fully comply with God's demands. As punishment for her actions, she drank water from the toilet and licked it off the floor during her hospital stay. Deanna explained that she had resisted God's will for a long time. She did not want to kill her children, which she thought angered him. He increasingly insisted that she fulfill what was predestined. The longer she resisted, the more severe the punishments he demanded. Ultimately, she felt she had to surrender and follow his will. Deanna compared her actions to those of Andrea, who killed her 2 children 2 years earlier under similar religious delusions. According to Deanna, after the end of the world, Joshua and Luke would serve as witnesses at the Last Judgment, which is why she ended her own life. Deanna confided to doctors that she felt fighting those voices was a selfish act to save her child, even though it meant she was disobeying God. Ultimately, she believed she made correct decision by submitting to the Lord's will. Deanna recounted that on the night of May 9th, she was awakened by what she believed to be a message from God, telling her that the time had come. She quietly got out of bed to avoid waking her husband. First, she went to Aaron's room, where she had previously hidden a large stone intended for a ritual act. She used the stone to strike the baby on the head several times. The baby cried out, so she placed a pillow over his face to silence him. Her husband, Dale, half asleep, entered the room. She reassured him that everything was fine, so he left and went back to sleep. He was unaware of the situation and missed the chance to save his children. Deanna kept the pillow on Aaron's face until she heard a gurgling sound and then stopped. Next, Deanna woke her 2 older sons, Joshua and Luke, and took them to the backyard garden. She led Luke aside, instructed little boy to dig in the ground, and then began hitting him on the head with a large stone. She struck him at least 8 times, crushing his skull. Afterward, she dragged his body behind the swing and placed a large stone on his chest, believing this would prevent him from breathing. She then spoke to God, saying this was all she could do for her son. Then, lightning struck, which she interpreted as a sign that Luke had died. Afterward, Deanna went back to the garden and began hitting Joshua. However, he was bigger and stronger, so and resisted his mother more. She then pinned his arms down and struck his head with a stone until he stopped moving. After this, she dragged his body behind the swing. Immediately after the act, she called 911 and confessed to the horrific crime. Aaron also suffered severely. Though the baby survived, the injuries were so serious that he was left disabled. The child lost his sight and independence, needing a wheelchair for the rest of his life due to his mother's abuse. The case of Deanna had many similarities to Andreas. Both women lived in Texas and homeschooled their children. They were deeply religious and believed their actions were for religious purposes. Both felt that they had no other option but to harm their children. They each called 911 afterward, and both were evaluated by the same psychiatrists before their trials. Deanna was aware of Andrea's case and often compared herself to her, but Deanna's trial unfolded very differently. Deanna appeared in court in late March 2004. The prosecution sought to punish her for 2 first-degree murders and aggravated assault on Aaron, requesting the death penalty, which is applicable in Texas. Alternatively, she faced 3 life sentences for her crimes. The defense lawyers argued that she was innocent due to insanity. They claimed that insanity was the only reason a religious mother, who loved and homeschooled her children, would kill 2 of them and harm another without showing any emotion. In Texas, at the time of the murder, the state had some of the strictest laws in the United States regarding the handling of murderers. Defendants had to prove they had a mental disorder during the crime and convince the court they couldn't distinguish right from wrong. 5 psychiatrists formed a team to evaluate Deanna's. The examination lasted 6 days, during which she cried almost continuously. She refused to look at photographs of her mutilated children and the crime scene. Some psychiatrists believed she was sane when she killed her sons, while others thought she couldn't distinguish good from evil due to religious hallucinations. Deanna shared with doctors several details that even those close to the Laney family, including household members and relatives, did not know. The doctors concluded that signs of mental disturbances began appearing more than 3 years ago. An early indication, similar to hallucinations, was Deanna smelling sulfur, which she believed came from her children and perceived as a demonic sign. Deanna also reported seeing Aaron playing with a spear. She claimed that God had shown her 3 methods for her to kill her son, using a spear or a knife, a stone, and strangulation. While doing chores in the garden before the massacre, Deanna tripped over a stone. She realized that the stone would become the main weapon she would use to sacrifice her sons. She didn't tell anyone about this, but openly claimed that the Lord had spoken to her. She shared this in church, warning parishioners about the impending end of the world. However, the congregation largely ignored her, as such statements were common in their religious tradition, which not everyone followed. During her initial psychiatric evaluation, Deanna showed no emotion and genuinely believed her children would be resurrected. After taking antipsychotic medication, she eventually understood her actions differently and felt remorse. Deanna was horrified to realize she had been suffering from hallucinations that drove her actions. During a psychiatric examination, it was determined that Deanna was insane when she committed the murders of her 2 sons, Joshua and Luke. The examiners concluded that she suffered from psychotic delusions that prevented her from distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the murder. However, the prosecutor disagreed with the diagnosis that Deanna was insane when she committed the murders. He argued that even if she believed she was doing God's will, she should have known that her actions were wrong according to state law. The prosecutor pointed out that her first action after the murder was to call 911, which indicated that she was aware of the wrongness of her actions. Additionally, when Dale entered the room, she attempted to hide what had happened, further suggesting that she knew her actions were wrong. The prosecution also stressed that when Deanna was unable to complete killing Aaron, she told God that he just needed to do the rest. This statement demonstrated to the prosecutor that she was aware of right and wrong. The prosecutor believed that her actions were intentional and planned, which is not consistent with the behavior of someone who is insane. Prison guards testified at the trial, describing Deanna's behavior in prison as unusually compliant. They rarely saw such conduct and believed she had serious mental health issues. The 911 call recording was part of the evidence the jurors considered. Her voice on the call was eerily calm. Jurors also requested a psychiatric report to understand why she stopped attacking Aaron, who was 14 months old at the time. However, they reached a verdict before receiving the report. Deanna sat near the portrait of her 3 children and cried loudly as the prosecutor recounted the horrifying incident of how she used a rock to hit her children. Her sons, Joshua and Luke, were struck on the head so severely that their brains were exposed, leaving their heads in a bloody state. Deanna's husband, Dale Laney, 47, attended the trial and was devastated by the loss of his 2 sons. He couldn't comprehend how this tragedy occurred and believed it was appropriate to commit Deanna to lifelong treatment in a clinic. In the end, Deanna was declared innocent due to insanity and had to be treated for mental illness at the hospital. Doctors expected her to need lifelong treatment and doubted her recovery. Dale divorced Deanna after she was admitted to the psychiatric clinic in 2008. He eventually remarried and started a new family. He continues to care for his disabled son, Aaron. Deanna was closely monitored by psychiatrists for 8 years. In 2012, doctors determined that she no longer needed to stay in the hospital because she was healthy and did not pose a threat to herself or others. She was released on a number of conditions. She was to have no contact with minors. She needs court permission if she wants to change her address. Had to allow social workers to visit her at any time, and had to continue taking her prescribed medications and undergo drug and substance testing. Only a few people, including her lawyers, know where Deanna lives now. Her ex-husband, Dale, felt very angry when he learned that she was released from the psychiatric clinic. Many people in society also agree with Dale. They believe the killer of 2 sons should be imprisoned or face the death penalty. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jodi Jones. Luke Mitchell, born in 1988, was the younger of 2 children. When he was 11, his parents separated, and he stayed with his mother without moving away. The family lived in the small, middle-class town of Eight Houses, Scotland. From a young age, Luke was well-behaved. He enjoyed horseback riding, excelled in school, and had a passion for music. He entered secondary school at St. David. However, during his teenage years, particularly in high school, he began to exhibit unusual behavior. At that time, he met a girl named Jodi Jones, who was almost 2 years younger than him. Jodi was born in 1989 in another small town in eastern Scotland. The country is generally known for having many small towns located close to one another. Jodi was the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Both of her parents worked for the Royal Mail. She was calm, well-mannered, and did well in school. The school director even commented that she had a bright future due to her achievements in class and extracurricular activities. Family was very important to her, and she was a creative person who enjoyed poetry and painting. Jodi was close to her eldest sister, Janine. Interestingly, all members of the Jones family had names starting with the letter J, including their parents, James and Judy. The family was decent and appeared genuinely happy until 1998, when the father began experiencing mental health issues and ended his life tragically. This was a devastating blow to the family, and the mother, Judy, had to leave her job to take care of the 3 children. The tragedy affected not only Judy but also the children, who were very worried. Eventually, Janine moved to Mayfield briefly to live with her grandmother, because everything in the house reminded her of the incident. However, after some time, she managed to cope with her problems and returned to her family. Gradually, life returned to normal. Everyone adapted to living without a father, the mother went back to work, and the community supported the family. As a teenager, Jones showed a rebellious streak. She wanted independence and began to experiment with clothes and appearance, listened to heavy rock bands popular at that time, and got herself a piercing. Her mother resisted these changes, particularly when Jodi showed interest in alcohol and prohibited substances. She began experimenting with these substances at an early age. Around the time Jodi met Luke, they were both 14 years old. The 2 met at school, became friends, started skipping classes together, and began dating in February 2003. They were deeply in love and even planned to marry. Jodi wrote in her diary that her feelings for Luke were serious and profound, not just a superficial crush. At the start of her relationship, Jodi didn't tell her friends or family about her boyfriend, Luke. For some reason, she kept him a secret. This hidden relationship went on for quite some time until she finally decided to share it. She confided in her older sister, Janine, revealing that she had a close relationship with Luke and felt very strong emotions for him. Janine understood the seriousness of the situation and informed their mother, Judy. Judy was of course shocked by the news, but was afraid of pushing her daughter away from her, so she decided to act very carefully. Judy wanted to meet Luke to understand him better, given Jodi's deep feelings, and asked Jodi to introduce them. In May 2003, Luke returned home with his girlfriend Jodi to meet her family and get to know them better. However, things didn't go as planned. Judy learned from Luke that Jodi was smoking and drinking with her friends, and Judy also discovered she had tried weed. This makes Judy worried about her daughter's increasingly close interactions and relationship with Luke. Even before the meeting, Judy had looked into Luke's background and learned about some of his unusual habits. Many local people had unfavorable words about him, seeing him as independent and daring, and occasionally rude, though he wasn't involved in any criminal activities. After a brief discussion, Judy was convinced that Luke was a bad influence on her daughter and that their relationship was risky. She forbade them from seeing each other and put her daughter under house arrest until June 30th, hoping this would help her focus on finishing the school year without distractions. However, Judy's plan failed. Luke and Jodi continued to meet in secret. Judy found a path Jodi used almost daily to sneak out and spend time with Luke. They would kiss near her home and share their frustrations about Judy's strictness. Luke and Jodi was eagerly waiting for the end of house arrest to spend their summer vacation together. June 30th finally arrived, and Jodi, very much looking forward to it, was thrilled that house arrest would end. She looked forward to seeing Luke and spending time with him freely. As soon as it was 5 p.m., Jodi left home. She planned to meet Luke for an evening together. Judy allowed her to go but set a curfew of 8 p.m. However, she did not return home at the appointed time, and Judy couldn't reach her by phone. Worried that something was wrong, Judy began searching for her daughter. When Judy went to Luke's house, Jodi was not there. Concerned, she asked Luke about her whereabouts, but he said he hadn't seen her that day. She had not shown up for their meet. This seemed unbelievable, as Jodi had eagerly awaited this moment and had hurried to meet him. Judy became angry, suspecting that he was lying. Judy, distraught, did not believe him and demanded he answers, but he insisted he knew nothing. He agreed to accompany Judy to search for she. Luke's parents owned a specially trained dog, so they decided to follow the route she was supposed to have taken. Since there was only one road linking the neighboring towns where they lived, so they searched this route, but did not find she, which was strange. She continued to ignore their calls and messages. Despite this, Judy, Luke, and the dog persisted, keep searching over and over again, but still in vain. Finally, while walking the route again in the dark around 10:30 p.m., the dog picked up a scent in a wooded area and led them there. Luke followed the dog into the forest, using a flashlight. In the distance, he noticed something white on the ground near some walls. As he approached, he made a horrifying discovery. It was Jodi's half-naked, disfigured body, tied up. She had been killed in a particularly brutal manner, which deeply shocked both Judy and Luke. Judy became hysterical, trying to aid her daughter, but it was too late. She showed no signs of life, and her body had already cooled. The mother couldn't accept that her daughter was gone. Luke comforted Judy's and called emergency services. Soon after, the police also arrived at the scene, and they were extremely shocked by this discovery, it was a literal bloodbath. Such violence had never occurred in this previously quiet area. Who could commit such a cruel act against a girl? The injuries of Jodi resembled those of Elizabeth Short, who was murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. The girl's body was not only cut in half, but her internal organs were removed. Additionally, on her face was a Glasgow smile, which is a knife cup that extends from one ear to the other. This case is one of the most famous yet to be solved. Due to the similarity of injuries, so the case of the murdered Jodi Jones was dubbed Black Scotland by some media outlets. This gruesome incident caused widespread panic among residents of both communities. Locals fear that a vicious maniac has appeared in the area and expect new attacks. To calm the public, police needed to urgently solve the case and incarcerate the dangerous criminal before he struck again. The specially trained dog amazed everyone by leading the search party straight to the body. The girl was found in a hidden spot, known only to her, under a tree, where her and a friend's initials were carved. Some witnesses believed this was not a coincidence but a clue. Jodi's body had numerous cuts and stab wounds, primarily on her chest, neck, and head. Her arms had many cuts, indicating she actively tried to defend herself. Her neck was so damaged she was nearly decapitated. She was also severely beaten, with her hair pulled out. The girl was raped, and she died from strangulation. Forensic experts investigated the crime scene and discovered a used condom, along with DNA samples from 3 men on Jodi's body. These samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Despite public concerns about a serial killer, the police believed the murder was personal and Jodi was not a random victim. Naturally, suspicion fell on her boyfriend, Luke, whom she was supposed to meet. Typically, those close to the victim are involved in such cases. It was believed that Luke might have been the last person to see her. His calm demeanor and indifference to Jodi not meeting him as planned raised eyebrows. Why didn't he call or look for her? Perhaps because he already knew she was dead. Luke was considered suspicious by the police, so they decided to investigate him. Although he had no visible injuries, the numerous defensive wounds on Jodi suggested she must have left marks on him. His face and body would likely have been scratched. Jodi's mother, Judy, noted that her daughter's rebellious behavior began after meeting Luke, and she blamed him for everything, from her daughter's change in style to her daughter's murder. She claimed that Luke's negative influence had drastically changed her daughter. During that time, Jodi behaved so recklessly that she had to be put under house arrest. At school, in addition to her behavioral changes, she experimented with illegal substances. Jodi's mother, Judy, believed Luke was directly linked to these issues. Judy also argued that the dog didn't lead Luke to the body. She said he knew the location and led the dog straight to the crime scene. She opposed Luke so strongly that she asked him not to attend the funeral, partly to avoid media attention, as his presence at the service would have drawn interest from local newspapers. Rumors spread rapidly, and by the next day, the whole school knew what had happened. There were claims that Luke was involved in the brutal murder. Luke was known for being eccentric and called himself the town madman, but his oddities were never violent. Police suspect Luke is the one who killed Jodi, so they obtained a search warrant for his home to gather evidence and bring charges against him. While searching his room, detectives came across a peculiar picture in numerous bottles filled with urine. They didn't understand why he filled them and kept them at home. He did not provide any explanation for this. And this is just one of many strange things police discovered in his home during their investigation. His home was filled with satanic symbols, and he was notably obsessed with the singer Marilyn Manson. From the point of view of the investigation, all of this is not in the suspect's favor. However, could such eccentricities really indicate he was capable of a violent crime? In spite of his peculiar behavior, Luke denied any involvement in the crime. From the moment the police expressed their suspicions, he insisted that he loved Jodi and could never harm her. During his discussion with investigators, he mentioned a hair clip, and this raised suspicion as the hairpin was not seen when her body was discovered. Furthermore, his description of her clothing suggested he saw her later in the day, contradicting his claim that he hadn't seen her after school. According to him, she had different clothes and a hair clip at school, which didn't align with his story. The DNA on the used condom did not match Luke's. However, Luke's DNA was found on Jodi's bra among other unidentified samples. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him, but he was still the main suspect in the murder investigation and was called in for questioning. Investigators also spoke with his parents. Local residents' opinion of him turned very negative, and teachers at the school tried to isolate him from other students out of safety concerns but were unsuccessful. After 2 months, Luke returned to his class, not wanting to study separately. Consequently, the school administration had to suspend Luke from classes for the duration of the investigation. For the next 10 months, Luke remained the sole suspect. The police focused exclusively on him and did not consider other potential suspects. Ultimately, based on circumstantial evidence, Luke, 15 years old, was arrested for the murder of 14-year-old Jodi Jones. He also faced charges for possessing and carrying a knife in a school setting. One of the challenges in the investigation, besides the lack of evidence, was determining the motive for the murder. The police faced an issue because Luke was below the age of criminal responsibility. Later, it was revealed that the police committed several violations. Specifically, they were criticized for interrogating the 15-year-old without any adults present, such as his legal guardians or parents, and without a lawyer. The boy was pressured and forced to confess. During this time, law enforcement was more focused on building the case and finding evidence of Luke's guilt. They visited his home again and conducted another search of his room. His house was searched 3 times in total. Surprisingly, no blood was found in the house. However, many suspicious items were discovered and later used to accuse him of a brutal crime. Among these items, investigators confiscated a large number of Marilyn Manson CDs and copies of Manson's film Doppelhörs. A particular 10-minute scene in the film, where the main character committed a brutal crime against a black dahlia, was of great interest. Many drew parallels between the film and the real tragedy, leading to the belief that Luke was simply imitating his idols. Investigators suspected that Luke might have timed the massacre to coincide with a cult or ritual inspired by his favorite rock bands. He was eventually arrested, bringing relief to the city's residents, who viewed him as a murderer, Satanist, and psychopath, posing a danger to society. His eccentricities were publicly scrutinized, although they had not harmed anyone, until Jodi's murder. Rumors and sensational stories quickly spread. The case was heard in the Supreme Court of Edinburgh. However, Luke denied any involvement in Jodi's death. The prosecution argued that he was guilty of killing his girlfriend Jodi, pointing out that he discovered her body, even though he used a specially trained dog. Jodi's mother claimed that he brought the dog himself. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a man resembling Luke in a khaki jacket with Jodi near the crime scene, hugging, around the time before she passed away. However, this testimony has caused much controversy, as other witnesses reported seeing 2 men, and the witness ultimately could not positively identify Luke. At the trial, Luke's ex-girlfriend testified that he once threatened her with a knife, which frightened her greatly. However, he claimed he had an alibi, but it was unreliable. Luke's brother stated that on the day of the incident, he was alone in the house watching TV. However, their mother, Corinne, said she was at home with Luke at that time, and the brother was just in his room and mistaken. Despite this, the brother insisted he was alone, watching adult films, which he only did when no one else was home. Eventually, Corinne admitted she had lied, and Luke was indeed not at home. They faced consequences for this, and she was even held accountable. So, where was Luke? He never revealed his whereabouts, and it was impossible to track his phone. The prosecution presented a reconstruction of the events. According to the prosecutor, Luke and Jodi met near a tree with their initials a little after 5 p.m. About 50 minutes later, he was seen alone. The prosecution claimed that he was fascinated by the story of the Black Dahlia and had watched a film of the same name, which included a disturbing scene of a massacre. Witnesses mentioned that he occasionally smoked a pipe. Then, he allegedly contemplated acting out something he saw in the film and harmed Jodi. It was also revealed that he accused possessed a small case containing a knife, engraved with Jodi's initials and her birth and death years. The case also had a note stating that the best day of he was the one that never came, a quote from Kurt Cobain, who was his idol. While none of this directly proves a crime, but the prosecution interpreted these details as suspicious coincidences, all pointing to he. The prosecutor's office believed Jodi had been killed with a particular knife, but the knife vanished and couldn't be found for comparison. Luke couldn't explain its disappearance. Neighbors of Luke testified during the trial that on the evening of Jodi's death, Luke burned something in his backyard. The prosecution suspected that this was how he disposed of the clothes he wore during the crime. Witnesses mentioned that the fire had a strange odor. However, when police searched his house, they found nothing significant. They did confiscate a large steel barrel used for burning garbage. In total, 122 items were confiscated in connection to the case. Notably, a new khaki jacket which a witness had seen disappeared from Luke's house. The prosecutor suggested that he burned it to hide blood stains. The jacket, purchased by his mother shortly before the murder, was last seen on him that day and then mysteriously vanished, raising further suspicions. A witness, a friend of Luke, testified at the trial. He claimed to have had a strange conversation with Luke shortly before the murder. Luke allegedly said that the best way to kill someone was by cutting their throat and mentioned that Luke could imagine killing someone. That day, Luke was texting Jodi, with their last message exchange occurring between 16:35 and 16:54. After 1700 hours, Luke called the information service to ask for the exact time. This was puzzling because if he was at home, as claimed, he could have just checked his watch. The lawyers argued that there was no evidence against Luke. Besides Luke's DNA from 2 other men was found at the crime scene. But only one was identified. It belonged to a friend of Janine. The prosecution suggested that these traces were present because Jodi wore Janine's shirt. Luke's DNA was on her bras, and her DNA was on his pants, but since they were in an intimate relationship, the presence of their DNA on each other's clothes was considered irrelevant to the murder case. The defense contended that Luke was eccentric, a fact he didn't deny. Yes, he was a rude teenager interested in strange things, but none of these were direct indicators of guilt. The lawyers attempted to demonstrate that he couldn't have committed the crime against his girlfriend. The numerous stab wounds to the throat nearly detached her head from her body. Forensic experts counted about 20 wounds in the neck area alone, while Jodi fought back desperately. Luke would have certainly sustained defensive marks, yet no witnesses or police officers noticed any on him during the search. There were no scratches on his face or body. The lawyers argued that he didn't have a motive for murder. He loved his girlfriend and valued their relationship. Why would he murder her, especially on a day when all restrictions imposed by her mother were lifted? They shared a serious romantic relationship filled with tender feelings and rarely argued. It just didn't make sense. The case was highly controversial, ultimately left for the jury to decide. On January 20, 2005, the jury began their deliberation. After about 5 hours, they concluded that Luke was guilty of first-degree murder. On February 11, the verdict stated that the 16-year-old would face at least 20 years in prison before eligibility for parole. However, many still doubted his involvement, believing that two people were involved in the murder. This thing allowed he to file several appeals, which were denied. Luke's mother had to sell their house and buy a smaller one to afford the legal fees. She fully supports her son and believes in his innocence. In 2019, a fund was established to raise money to support a man named Luke and to file new appeals on his behalf. However, the site hosting the fund eventually blocked it because it violated the site's terms. Despite these setbacks, Luke remained determined. Since 2003, when he was first accused of killing his girlfriend, he has consistently denied involvement. He made it clear that even if he were offered release in exchange for a confession, he would not accept it because he would never harm Jodi, his girlfriend. Luke had numerous supporters who, after hearing the guilty verdict in court, distributed flyers throughout the city proclaiming his innocence. So strong was their support that they even considered storming the prison. Their aim was to highlight what they believed to be Luke's wrongful conviction. However, their approach was questionable. Such actions could potentially harm Luke's case, and they also negatively impacted the Jones family, who were unjustly blamed for the situation and even received threats. In May 2007, the controversial trial resulted in the creation of a documentary about the case, which renewed interest in Luke's case. Moreover, this film revealed numerous irregularities committed by the police in charge of the investigation. Initially, the police considered Luke innocent, although they investigated him as a suspect. However, as more was learned about him, they found unconventional and unknown aspects. Most of the townspeople had a clearly negative opinion. Amid rumors and the extraordinary behavior of the town's eccentric, the investigation ceased to consider other people as suspects. All the evidence was circumstantial. Even Jodi's wounds, initially believed to resemble movie cuts, did not match so much. In fact, it was even questioned whether Luke was really a fan of Satanism and Marilyn Manson. He just followed some unpopular trends of his teenage years. To prove his innocence, Luke agreed to take a polygraph test on April 25, 2012. He passed the test successfully. 2 months later, the mother of he also underwent the polygraph test, and experts confirmed that both passed flawlessly. The documentary explored a theory that the murder might have been committed by a student who had written an essay about the murder of a girl in the woods a few weeks before Jodi's death. A friend of this student saw him shortly after the crime and noticed scratches on his face. Luke's family believes the investigation overlooked a crucial piece of evidence: condoms containing unknown male DNA. No DNA from Luke was found. They argue that the motive for the murder was rape, with the rapist attacking she and dragging her into the woods. They feel the investigation should focus more on this angle. Additionally, they claimed that when Jodi's mother came to Luke's house, he had not yet showered, yet there was no blood on him. They argue that if he were the killer, he would have showered and changed clothes immediately to wash off any blood. Years ago, the crime scene was vandalized with red graffiti referencing Jodi's murder. The message included a different name, suggesting that another person might be the murderer. This graffiti is believed to have been painted by Luke's supporters to assert his innocence. Luke's family hired 2 private detectives who identified several suspects, with Mark Kane among them. Mark was a local drug addict who died suddenly in May 2018 at age 38. Witnesses saw him at the crime scene on the day of the murder, with a scratched face and known to carry a knife. He claimed the scratches were from falling into bushes, but no one believed him given the context of Jodi's murder. However, despite his suspicious background, all suspects, including Mark, were eventually interrogated and cleared from the list. The family of Jodi is certain that the person who killed their daughter is Luke, the one currently in prison. They have no doubt about his guilt. Meanwhile, Luke's family continues their pursuit of justice. Almost 2 decades have passed since his imprisonment, and his legal team has accused investigators of multiple violations, notably the absence of forensic analysis on several DNA samples from Jodi, particularly those related to allegations of rape. This significant oversight has cast doubt on the conviction. Luke's lawyers are determined to overturn the sentence. Now 35 years old, Luke might be eligible for parole in 2025. However, he reportedly failed a random test this year. By regulation, after this point, the opportunity for parole will be postponed for another 3 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jock Waller. June 1, 2011 marked a turning point in the life of the Jock Waller family. That day, Jock called her sister Cheryl to say that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay Waller and would be home later. However, Jock never returned and did not call back. After trying to contact her sister without success, Cheryl became increasingly worried. To address her concerns, she drove to the police station around 7 p.m. At the station, Cheryl announced that Clay Waller had killed younger sister. It was a shocking statement for all the police, as Jock had only called Cheryl a few hours earlier and there was no reason to be alarmed and assumed that she was in trouble. But it turned out that Cheryl's hunch was correct, and her sister Jock was indeed caught up in a macabre story. So what happened to Jock, and what made Cheryl really believe that Clay Waller had killed her sister even before Jock was reported missing? Jock was a sweet, kind, and caring girl when she met Clay, and they hit it off. Clay had a stutter that caused some people to make fun of him, which made him feel self-conscious. Jock, however, was different. She never made fun of him and always protected him, making sure he didn't get hurt. That was her nature. She protected the vulnerable, fought against injustice, and helped people. As their love blossomed, Jock and Clay became closer and eventually married when they were in their 30s. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, and Jock was building a family there. Jock had a successful career, unlike her husband, whose life was constantly failing and couldn't stay in one place for long. As a result, Jock was the sole provider for the family. She had always dreamed of having children, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She was even more delighted to learn that she would be having triplets. The couple welcomed 2 daughters, Avery and Addison, and a son named Maddox. Caring for 3 newborns at once was a huge challenge for Jock, but she did not complain. Instead, she took on the responsibility alone, as her husband seemed indifferent to the children. Clay took a job at the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife took care of the children, but he did not stay long. He was fired after a year, and during that time, only Jock's parents and sister helped her with the children so she could rest. After Clay lost her job, Jock began working to support the family. Despite having a child, Clay did not change his habits and showed little interest in his family or his job. Occasionally, he took on a part-time job, but it did not bring in the income they needed. He seemed content to live off Jock, who worked 40 hours a week while still caring for the children. Jock's career took off, leading her to a management position at an insurance company. However, this success only made her husband more comfortable, and he decided not to worry about money anymore. Instead of appreciating his wife, Clay abused her in every way possible. He insulted her, called her worthless, and told her that no one wanted her. He had affairs with other women. Jock's parents and sister were extremely outraged by her husband's behavior and convinced her to divorce him. However, at that time, Jock was not ready for such an extreme choice and tried to keep her family together. Every day, any hope of saving her marriage went up in smoke before her eyes. A few years later, the couple began to have problems. They were in financial trouble because her husband was not working and Jock's salary was not enough to support their growing family. The mortgage debts kept mounting and they were in danger of losing their home. Jock decided to move in with her sister, while her husband stayed with a friend. By this time, the children were a little older and Jock made the difficult but necessary decision for herself to get a divorce because she felt that she and the children deserved a better life. She talked to her husband about it, and at first, Clay took the news calmly. However, he later changed his mind and refused to divorce. Clay began to threaten Jock. At first, the threats were indirect and vague, but eventually, he directly threatened her life, claiming that divorcing him would be a death sentence for her and the children. This scared Jock, but she did not give up on her decision. She could not continue living this way and sought to distance herself from her husband. Jock confided in her family about Clay's behavior and kept a diary of his disturbing actions. She also noted that her husband had been following her. At the time, Jock and the children were staying with her sister. The children, who were only 5 years old, did not understand the situation, but Jock explained that it was necessary. Eventually, things began to return to normal and the divorce proceedings were almost complete. Clay seemed to have accepted the divorce and stopped bothering Jock. The two began to move forward and began to build a new relationship. Jock allowed her husband to visit the children and they stopped arguing. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jock scheduled a meeting at the lawyer's office to discuss the final important details of the divorce. That day, their son Maddox was with his father, while the other children were at Jock's sister Cheryl's house. After the meeting, Jock planned to pick up her son. When she left the office, she called her sister Cheryl and told her everything had gone well. She drove to Clay's house to pick up her son and then made plans to return to her sister's house. That was their last conversation. Jock, 39, never heard from her again. Over time, Cheryl grew worried and started calling Jock, but she didn't answer. Cheryl then tried calling Clay, but he didn't answer either. Cheryl suspected that Clay might have done something to Jock, so she texted him, "If I don't hear from Jock in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." Clay immediately called her back, asking what was wrong. Cheryl replied that he knew exactly what she meant. But Clay insisted that he did not know where Jock was and promised to tell her to call Cheryl back when he saw her. Doubting him, Cheryl took younger sister children to her parents' house and filed a police report herself. The police were wary of Cheryl's claim that Clay was involved in her sister's disappearance, but did not send her home to wait for 24 hours to pass. Instead, they quickly decided to contact Clay to find out if there was any clue as to Jock's whereabouts. They called Clay, and he said that he had lunch with Jock. He said that they had met at the lawyer's office to discuss some aspects of the divorce and then drove to his house to talk further. He said they had a chat and then he went to the store. When he returned, Jock's car was gone and he assumed that she had left. According to Clay, their son Maddox was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and Jock knew this and was not concerned about their son. He insisted that she had come to his house just to talk. Not for their son. Clay's words seemed hard to believe. Jock had made it clear to her sister that she had come to Clay's house for her son. She had no intention of discussing anything with him, especially since she would not allow her son to be with another woman so far away. She would have been furious with Clay in that situation. Cheryl did not believe the story. She convinced the police that Clay was lying and hiding something, and that things were indeed serious. Jock and her car were reported missing, and a massive search began. Hours later, Jock's car, a Honda Pilot, was found on the interstate with flat tires. It was no accident. The tires had been deliberately punctured and looked like they had been set up. The car was found open and empty, with some blood on the back seat, but there were no clues to Jock's whereabouts. It seemed increasingly likely that she had been attacked and kidnapped. The search for Jock focused on that area, with many volunteers working alongside police and rescue dogs. Despite the unbearable heat, people were eager to help. The family offered a $3,500 reward for any information about Jock's whereabouts. Despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful. The police began to focus more on her ex-husband, Clay. They went to his house to talk to him again, but Clay repeated the same story. When police asked to search his home and car, Clay refused and immediately hired a lawyer to defend his rights. For days after she disappeared, Clay left his wife a tearful voicemail. "Hi honey, it's Sunday. I went missing on Wednesday. Please, if you get this message, call me. I don't know where you are and I miss you so much. Please call me." The police then obtained a search warrant and returned to his home. While examining the car, they discovered stains that looked like blood. The forensic team collected samples and sent them for testing, which showed that they were fish blood. It turned out that Clay had intentionally covered the car with fish blood to throw the forensic experts off. When the house was inspected, it was noticed that the floor had no carpet. A section of the floor had been cut out, leaving a noticeable mark. Small drops of blood were found on the basement hallway wall. There were signs that furniture had been moved. Something unusual was going on in the house. The forensic team checked under the floor and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood and carpet samples were sent to the lab for analysis. The police tracked Jock's last movements. At 1:10 a.m., she was seen at a pharmacy with her ex-husband. They appeared to be normal. 2 hours later, Jock was caught on camera. ATM security recorded the withdrawal. Jock did not appear on the surveillance camera afterward, while Clay did. Hours later, Clay, his son, and his new girlfriend went to a toy store. They then went to a car wash in his pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. Clay changed clothes and washed the car and boat. Suspicion grew around Clay, and he became the prime suspect. Police released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, asking any witnesses who saw them to come forward. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River, which was later confirmed by Clay's cell phone records. This prompted police to conduct a search of the area, but despite their efforts, nothing was found. At that time, forensic testing revealed that drops of blood found in Clay's home matched those of the missing woman, Jock. Based on this evidence, the police suspected that Jock was likely dead. The police brought Clay in for questioning and attempted to get him to confess to the murder. However, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing, instead claiming that it was old blood from a domestic violence incident in the kitchen. Without a body, the police could not arrest a suspect and charge him. They released Clay but continued to monitor and investigate him. Clay, who had worked as a deputy sheriff, knew full well that the police were watching him, and he played a cat-and-mouse game with them. He would go to deserted vacant lots to disrupt the investigation while the entire neighborhood was involved in the search for Jock, the missing mother of 3 children. Clay continued to harass the search party and Jock's family. He drove by, insulting them and yelling that they were wasting their time, claiming that they wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more and more suspicions. Meanwhile, Jock's sister, Cheryl, sought custody of the triplets, fearing for their safety as Clay was their father. Clay's erratic behavior eventually led to Cheryl gaining custody, which angered him even more. He began threatening Cheryl with violence, even posting about it on social media. Cheryl recorded these threats and reported them to the police. Nearly 5 months after Jock's disappearance, police arrested Clay and charged him with making threats to death. Although he admitted to the charges, Clay claimed he acted out of anger and despair over losing custody of the children, with no intention of harming Cheryl. He believes he is the victim in this situation. During the investigation, police discover that Clay is being accused of stealing $50,000 from a previous company and stalking a man. Despite this, Clay denies any involvement in Jock's disappearance. When questioned, Clay claims that Jock's new lover, Harry, is responsible for her death. However, police investigate Harry and discover that he has a solid alibi, eliminating him as a suspect. The evidence points to Clay, but he continues to deny any wrongdoing. He is eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for threatening his wife's sister, Cheryl. Police continue to investigate Jock's disappearance, searching Devil's Island but finding no trace of her. 2 years after her disappearance, police had gathered enough circumstantial evidence, including video footage and blood found in Clay's home, to charge him with Jock's murder, even though her body had never been found. It was a risky move, because if they lost, the DA's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. Clay, after consulting with his attorney, made a deal with the prosecutor to reduce his sentence. Clay offered to plead guilty to murder and provide a burial site. Jock's family agreed to the deal because it was important to find her body and give her a proper burial. Clay led police to his ex-wife's burial site. It was located in a remote location on a sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. The initial investigation was hampered because Clay could not remember the exact tree in which he had buried Jock's body. However, he eventually revealed that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her grave. A gardener pointed out that large amounts of fertilizer could kill trees, leading the police to focus on 3 dead trees in the area. When they dug up the grave, they found Jock's body under one of the trees, wearing the same clothes she had last worn. The woman was identified from dental records as Jock Waller. The discovery of Jock's body brought closure to her loved ones, who were finally able to hold a funeral for her. Ironically, the ceremony was held on her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. At this time, Cheryl had to tell her children that their mother had died and that their father was responsible for her death. This revelation was devastating to the children, who not only lost their mother, but also their relationship with their father. The children immediately shunned Clay and refused to communicate with him. As part of his plea agreement, Clay was required to provide a detailed confession of his crimes. According to his statement, he began thinking about murder a year before Jock died, after she announced that she wanted to end their relationship. Despite these dark thoughts, he initially pushed them aside because Jock was the mother of his children. Clay felt he couldn't let Jock take his children. He had warned her earlier that if she continued to do so, things would not end well for her, but she chose to ignore him. The night before the murder, he had dug a grave for Jock on Devil's Island. It was then that he began to consider taking her life. At the time, their divorce seemed to be going smoothly. After visiting a lawyer, the couple had a conversation in which Jock suggested they have one last intimate encounter together. They went to his house, where they continued the conversation in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator to find a snack. When he raised his head, he accidentally hit Jock on the head, causing her nose to bleed. This enraged her, and she stormed out into the hallway. She began screaming that he would never see their children again. This was Clay's breaking point. In a fit of rage, he punched her in the face and then strangled her. After the fight, he dumped Jock's body in a prepared grave on Devil's Island. He then cleaned up the crime scene by washing his car, cleaning the house, and showering. He changed into new clothes and attempted to resume his normal routine by meeting his new girlfriend and son at a toy store, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Clay claimed the murder was an impulsive act driven by emotion, contradicting his earlier statement about digging the grave the day before. This inconsistency raised suspicions of premeditated murder. The medical examiner's report showed that the victim had suffered multiple skull fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma rather than a simple fight. Clay's initial story was not believed. Clay seemed content with his 20-year sentence for second-degree murder, showing no remorse for killing his ex-wife Jock. However, the prosecution had a surprising twist. The hole he dug to bury Jock was in another state, Illinois, and the murder took place in Missouri. These features fall under federal laws against domestic violence across states, and he violated them. This allowed him to add 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. Clay had no idea that his confession would have serious consequences due to a federal law he was unaware of. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was viewed as a model family, meeting everyone's expectations with their stable financial situation and outstanding children. They earned admiration from the community. The father, William Petit, grew up in Connecticut and excelled in many sports during high school, especially basketball, where he demonstrated natural leadership. Beyond his athletic talents, he was also the top student in his class, earning a law degree from Dartmouth University. However, William discovered that his true passion was not in law. He wanted to help others, care for the sick, and making the world a better place. After graduating, he chose to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. During his third year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, William met Jennifer Hawk, a nurse in the oncology department and medical center co-director of a pre-graduation internship program. They quickly fell in love, and those around them believed they were a perfect match. They married in 1985, and 4 years later, they welcomed their first daughter, Haley. Then, they to buy a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. After recovering from childbirth, Jennifer resumed her role as a nurse and co-director of the internship. Unfortunately, she later developed multiple sclerosis, an incurable condition that she fought for the rest of her life. During her struggle with the disease, her family was always by her side and supported her. At 10 years old, their old daughter, Haley, started raising money for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, successfully gathering big funds over the years. Michaela was also a strong student and intended to take over the fundraising when her old sister went to college. She spent the summer learning to cook and loved making meals for her family. Sadly, this everyday activity would ultimately lead the family to a tragic meeting with their attacker. In July 2007, Michaela was making dinner for her family, but then she realized she needed more ingredients. She and her mother went to the nearest market to shop. At the same time, Joshua, had been released from prison, was also at the market. Joshua had a troubled childhood, and a week after birth, he was given up for adoption. The Komisarjevsky family, known for their artistic achievements in Europe, adopted him. They were a strict and religious family. Despite having a high IQ, Joshua struggled in school, which led his adoptive parents to let him homeschool. During his trial, he revealed that he had been sexually abused by a cousin when he was a child, but his family opted to keep this a secret. This experience shaped his rebellious and rampant behavior. At the age of 14, Joshua Komisarjevsky was accused of abusing his sister, and around this time, he committed his first burglary. In 2002, he was arrested on 18 charges of burglary, leading to a 9-year prison sentence. He was released on parole in 2007 when he was 27 years old. Officials deemed him a danger to society, describing him as a calculating criminal with perverted tendencies. Despite these warnings, the jury found him fit for release. After his release, Joshua lived in a halfway house for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent much of his life in prison, beginning his incarceration at the age of 16 in 1980. Throughout the years, he was often arrested for violent robbery and burglary. He was sentenced in 2004 and granted parole in 2006, which brought him to the same halfway house, where he met Joshua. Returning to the night of July 22, 2007, when Michaela was cooking dinner for her family when she realized she needed more ingredients. She asked her mother to take her to the nearest market. Unbeknownst to them, Joshua was watching taking note of everything, the type of car they drove, their appearances, and Michaela's blonde hair. After shopping, Michaela and Jennifer returned home, still unaware that someone was following them. Soon after, Stephen sent a text to Joshua expressing his eagerness to get started and mentioning that he needed a margarita. Stephen followed up by asking if they were still on, to which Joshua affirmed that they were. Meanwhile, Joshua secretly followed Michaela and Jennifer in his car, finding out where they lived before leaving the area. The family enjoyed what appeared to be a calm and normal dinner, unaware that it would be their last together. In the early morning, while everyone else was asleep, William was dozing in the living room. Their peace was suddenly disrupted by strange noises in the house. William suddenly felt groggy, in pain, and unable to think clearly. Two intruders, Joshua and Stephen, had come in through an unlocked door with the intention of robbing the family. They found a baseball bat and began to beat William. He heard one of the attackers say, "If he moves, shoot him." Afterward, William was bound with zip ties. Joshua and Stephen used ties to restrain William and bind him to a pole in the basement. They then went upstairs to find Haley's room, where she was sleeping. Haley and Michaela were tied by their hands and feet to their bedposts, with pillowcases over their heads. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer was also asleep. The intruders quietly entered her room and woke her up. They tied her hands and feet, showing their control over the situation. Joshua and Stephen carefully searched the house, even taking time to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After gathering jewelry, cash, and other valuables, they prepared to leave. However, a Petit family nightmare was just beginning. After selling the stolen items at a pawn shop and realizing they hadn't made as much money as they hoped, Joshua and Stephen, driven by greed, decided to return to the house. They discovered a check register containing $40,000 and plotted to steal $155,000. Before going back, they also filled a couple of gasoline cans, as captured by surveillance cameras. Once back at the house, they threatened Jennifer, saying they would kill her entire family if she didn't help them. Fearing for family's safety, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to go with Stephen to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua exploited Jennifer's absence, he entering Michaela's room, untying her, and attempting to undress her. He took photos with his cell phone and assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, he took her to the bathroom to clean her, ensuring no DNA evidence was left behind. He then ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. Evidence of Joshua's assault on Michaela was found during her autopsy, where state medical examiner Dr. Wayne Carver discovered his DNA in her body. At the bank, everything seemed normal, but Stephen did not notice Jennifer's actions while they waited in line. Before reaching the teller, she wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note stated that her name was Jennifer Hawk Petit and that she needed to withdraw $115,000 from her savings account. She mentioned that her family was in danger and requested that the police be called, or they would be killed. Despite Jennifer not having any identification, the teller decided to give her the money. With the cash in hand, Jennifer left the bank to return to the car with Stephen. Meanwhile, the bank employee quickly called the police to report the situation. Meanwhile, at the house, Joshua disclosed to Stephen what he had done to Michaela, implying he could easily do the same to Jennifer. Then, Stephen restrained Jennifer by pushing her to the ground and began to undress her. William, upstairs, could hear his wife being assaulted and shouted for help. He then overheard one of the attackers say, "Don't worry, it will all be over in a couple of minutes." William managed to free himself and crawled to the basement stairs, eventually making it to the backyard. Joshua went to check on William but discovered that he had escaped. In her confession, Stephen mentioned that while Joshua was assaulting Jennifer on the living room floor, he entered and revealed that William had fled. Upon hearing this, Stephen strangled Jennifer to death while continuing his assault on her. Soon after, William began shouting for help. His neighbor, unable to recognize him because of his injuries, called 911. Realizing that the police would soon arrive, Joshua and Stephen decided to destroy any evidence. They poured gasoline on Jennifer's lifeless body and around the house, including the daughter's bedrooms. Investigators later found traces of gasoline on the beds of Haley, Michaela, and on the clothes they were wearing. Joshua and Stephen set the house on fire and tried to escape, not knowing that police had already blocked the road a few miles ahead. They crashed into a police vehicle, and within 5 minutes, they were surrounded by officers, pulled from their car, and arrested. They were quickly identified as former convicts. The fire in the house was spreading quickly. An ambulance arrived and took the seriously injured father, William, to the nearest hospital. Soon after, firefighters fought to put out the flames. When they put out the flames succeeded, they were met with a terrible scene. The first body they found was Jennifer, who was completely burnt with remnants of rope around her ankles. On the second floor, they discovered Michaela, who was tied to her bed and had been entirely trapped by the fire. Surprisingly, Haley had managed to escape her bindings and tried to flee but collapsed just a few meters away after inhaling too much smoke. William managed to free himself from his restraints, leave the house, and crawled to a neighbor's yard for help. The neighbor did not recognize him at first because of his severe injuries. Both Joshua and Stephen admitted to the murders. Detectives reported that Stephen smelled of gasoline during her interrogation. Each suspect accused the other of being the leader and planner of the home invasion. Joshua also placed blame on William for the murder. In Joshua's diary, which was later presented as evidence, he referred to William as a coward and claimed that William could have saved his family if he wanted to. Stephen's trial started on September 13, 2010, with a jury composed of 7 women and 5 men. The defense claimed that Joshua was the main leader behind the crime. Conversely, prosecutors argued that both Joshua and Stephen were equally accountable. On October 5, after approximately 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Stephen Hayes guilty. The sentencing phase commenced on October 18, in which the jury was initially torn over whether to recommend life imprisonment or the death penalty. Stephen's defense claimed that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. On November 8, the jury recommended a death sentence for Stephen on all 6 capital felony charges. Stephen had earlier tried to negotiate a plea deal for a life sentence, but instead, prosecutors sought the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Stephen Hayes, the defendant, expressed his remorse for the pain he caused the Petit family. He mentioned that death would be a relief for him and hoped it would provide peace and comfort to those he had harmed. Judge John Blues sentenced him to death 6 times, along with an additional 106 years for other offenses. However, in August 2015, Stephen's death sentence was converted to life imprisonment after Connecticut abolished the death penalty. Joshua Komisarjevsky's trial began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers proposed a plea deal where he would plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence. However, the prosecutors were aiming for the death penalty, arguing that Joshua was a troubled individual who had been influenced by Stephen. On October 13, 2011, Joshua was found guilty, and on December 9, 2011, the jury recommended the death penalty. During sentencing, he expressed his shame and regret over the crime, asserting that he never meant to kill anyone. Judge Blues scheduled Joshua's execution for July 20, 2012, acknowledging his involvement in the crime. However, in August 2015, Connecticut abolished the death penalty, and Joshua's sentence was changed from death to life imprisonment, just like Stephen's sentence. The trials and sentencing of Stephen and Joshua marked a significant and troubling time in Connecticut's legal history. The severe nature of their crimes and the emotional toll on everyone involved, including jurors, revealed the difficulties the legal system faces in dealing with such heinous acts. William is the only person in the family to survive this tragic incident. After spending 4 days in the hospital, he was released to attend his family's funeral. Struggling with the guilt of not being able to save the lives of his wife and children, he founded an organization to support children and young victims of violence, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to aid there. Later, he joined the Republican Party and entered politics, eventually becoming a state representative. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Alex Murdaugh. Richard Alexander, Alex Murdaugh, born May 27, 1968, is a member of a prominent and well-connected South Carolina legal family. The Murdaugh family has dominated the region's legal system for more than 100 years, with 3 consecutive generations serving as district attorneys of the 14th Judicial District from 1920 to 2006. However, that dynasty has come to an abrupt end for Alex. The Murdaugh family has been building the foundation for their success for decades. Specifically, when Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., founded the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elaf, and Dietrich, PMPD, they became an influential family in the area. Their strong presence led to the Hampton area being referred to as Murdaugh County. Alex sought to follow in his family's footsteps and pursued a law degree at the University of North Carolina. While in college, he met and married High's wife, Margaret Maggie Brandstetter, in 1993. They began seeing each other in 1991 and were married on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex, a personal injury attorney who works at the family firm PMPD, seeks to continue the family legacy. Unlike previous generations of Murdaughs, however, Alex abused the power and influence of the family business to cover up financial crimes, theft, and even suspected murder. His nefarious dealings lasted for more than a decade until his youngest son, Paul, died in a boating accident. Paul's boating accident was the latest in a string of suspicious deaths linked to the Murdaugh family. Many believe that these deaths were not actual accidents but part of a larger cover-up. Given the history and resources of the Murdaugh family, this theory seems plausible, especially considering how they handled Mallory Beach's death. Paul Murdaugh sailed his family boat to a party on Pucas Island on February 23, 2019. Having just graduated from high school, Paul and his girlfriend Morgan Dowdy, along with Anthony Cook and Mallory Beach, wanted to have a party and a night of unsupervised fun. They planned to start the night with a house party and oyster roast on the island. However, parties can't start without alcohol, so Paul bought some beer and hard liquor using his brother's ID. They left the Murdaugh River house at 7 p.m. By midnight, they were ready to continue their fun, so Paul decided to steer the boat to downtown Beaufort. There, he and Connor, a teenager, also joined the boat party, had 2 rounds of drinks around 1 a.m. On the way back to the boat, Paul and Connor were caught on a surveillance camera. At this point, Paul had been drinking heavily, and according to other passengers, he began to act strangely around 1:15 a.m. As they sailed, the situation became more complicated. The group started to disagree with Paul as he steered the boat in a disoriented manner and acted as if he were drunk. Mallory recalled that Anthony asked Paul to take him to a nearby rock to get off, but Paul refused. Morgan later commented that Paul took his hands off the wheel several times to argue with her, which made Mallory very nervous. GPS data from the boat's Garmin device indicated a period of acceleration. Paul, however, denied pushing the boat forward, but he was at the wheel at 2:20 a.m. when the boat hit the bridge, throwing Mallory into the water. The other teens were also in danger. Connor suffered a broken jaw and Morgan sustained a serious hand injury. Connor called 911 and help arrived immediately. When Deputy Buford arrived, the teens were in a state of chaos. The first thing he noticed was that Anthony was in distress. He reported that when he saw Paul smiling, Anthony actually tried to run past him to get to Paul. Police reported finding blood in the main cabin of the boat and a large crack in the hull from the collision. All of the teens were intoxicated and were taken to the hospital for treatment, except for Anthony. Everyone agreed to treatment except Paul, who was highly agitated and had a blood alcohol level of 0.243, while above the legal limit. Paul's father, Alex, was present that night, going from room to room trying to calm everyone down and control the situation. After 8 days of searching, Mallory's body was finally found. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head and subsequent drowning. Several witnesses, including Paul's girlfriend Morgan, testified that Paul was speeding in the boat that night. However, Paul was neither arrested nor charged. This led to speculation that Alex may have intervened in the legal process to help his son escape punishment. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was sued for wrongful death. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, knew her son was intoxicated while the group was boating. Additionally, they claimed that his brother Buster provided the paperwork necessary for the group to purchase alcohol. It was not until April 18, 2019, on Mallory's 20th birthday, that Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of operating a boat while intoxicated, resulting in her death and the serious injury of 2 other passengers. Paul pleaded not guilty and was released on $50,000 bail. Unfortunately, Paul's trial date never arrived. He died before the case could proceed. Another death that appears to be linked to the Murdaugh family is that of Stephen Smith, an openly gay teenager whose body was found on July 8, 2015, lying in the middle of a road in Hampton County, South Carolina. The cause of death for the victim was severe head trauma. The incident was initially ruled a hit-and-run accident, and no suspects were arrested. However, the victim's mother believes her son was murdered in a hate crime. Stephen had been classmates with Buster Murdaugh in high school. In addition to their friendship, there were rumors that the two had been romantically involved. Some have suggested Buster was involved in Stephen's death and that the story of him running away after the accident was a lie. On March 22, 2023, the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement reopened the case, confirming that his death was indeed a homicide, although no suspects have been named. Another case involves the Murdaugh family. Gloria was the longtime housekeeper for Alex's family. On February 2, 2018, she suffered a serious head injury after falling down the stairs at the Moselle mansion. She later died on February 26, 2018, from complications related to the accident. Alex claimed that his dogs greeted Gloria at the top of the stairs, causing her to trip and fall backward, leading to the accident. It is unclear why no autopsy was performed to confirm Alex's version of events. Gloria's death certificate listed the cause of death as natural causes. Gloria's sons sued for their mother's untimely death in 2018 and were awarded a $1.4 million insurance settlement in 2020. However, the money never reached them. Alex allegedly plotted to collect the insurance money, approached Gloria's sons, and encouraged them to sue him, even introducing them to an attorney named Corey Fleming. Corey Fleming was a longtime friend and associate of one of Alex's sons. They conspired to defraud and steal the Gloria family's insurance money. They wired the insurance money into Alex's bank account without notifying the Gloria family that they had received the money. Gloria's sons then filed a new civil lawsuit on September 15, 2021, against Alex. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Gloria's death. Investigators are trying to determine whether there is any criminal liability in her death. Based on a request from the Hampton County coroner, they found that Gloria's cause of death was not due to natural causes. After Gloria's family gave permission, authorities conducted an autopsy to investigate further. In late September 2021, Alex faced multiple charges related to financial misconduct and embezzlement. Before the Gloria family sued, Alex had been involved in fraud and embezzlement for nearly a decade. Alex was accused of participating in a money laundering and painkiller abuse scheme that lasted from October 2013 to September 2021, along with his distant cousin and co-defendant, Curtis Smith. On September 4, 2021, Alex and Curtis conspired to commit murder. Alex provided Curtis with a gun and instructed him to shoot Alex himself, intending for Buster, Alex's only surviving son, to collect Alex's life insurance policy after his death. Curtis went to the location Alex had prepared, where Alex pretended that his tire was flat, and Curtis shot him as instructed. However, the bullet only caused minor injuries to Alex, who called 911 himself. When local law enforcement inspected the scene, they recognized signs of foul play but were unable to prove it. A few days later, Alex admitted that he had conspired with Curtis and staged the shooting. His lawyer informed him that he was mentally unstable and that malicious elements were taking advantage of the situation. They claimed that Alex wanted to commit suicide so that Buster could collect a $10 million life insurance policy. Alex turned himself in when he learned a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was charged with fraud and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. He filed a police report just 2 days after the incident. Alex announced that he would resign from his family law firm and enter rehab for treatment. After his release, he was quoted as saying that he had made many decisions that he regretted. In September 2021, the South Carolina Supreme Court indefinitely suspended Alex's law license. Further investigation into Alex's life revealed that he had committed several financial crimes, including tax evasion, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds from clients and the law firm where he worked. Alex was released from rehab on October 14, 2021, and was later arrested. He was charged with 2 felony counts of fraud. The arrest was based on an investigation into the misappropriation of investment funds related to the unnatural death of Gloria. This time, Alex was denied bail. This was just the beginning of Alex's legal troubles. On November 18, 2021, he was indicted on 27 counts of financial fraud, including allegedly stealing money from clients, other lawyers, and the family of his deceased housekeeper. On December 9, 2021, an additional 21 charges were filed against Alex, bringing the total to 48. The charges include 1 count of counterfeiting, 4 counts of money laundering, 7 counts of computer crime, and 9 counts of breach of trust with intent to commit fraud, among others. It is estimated that Alex stole more than $6.2 million from his victims. The investigation into Alex's business dealings has been ongoing, with new charges being filed against him. By June 2022, the total number of charges against him had reached 81. On July 13, 2022, when Alex was officially disbarred, he faced a total of 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. Mallory Beach's mother, whose daughter was a 19-year-old victim, was one of several people who filed lawsuits related to the estate of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh. The prominent attorney's alleged financial misconduct has raised questions about his character and conduct. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, has decided to review what they know and have accepted as the truth about the double murder and further investigate the financial crimes against Alex. Investigators realized that this was a troubled marriage. Alex and Maggie were experiencing marital difficulties. Maggie was living separately at the family home on Edisto Island, which is a little over an hour's drive from the Moselle estate. Maggie's sister, Marion Branstetter, told police that Maggie had no plans to see her husband on the night of the murder. Alex contacted Maggie on that fateful day, asking her to come to the family hunting lodge. He wanted her to accompany him to visit his father, who was dying and could pass away at any moment. Initially, she did not want to go but texted a friend, saying that her husband's behavior was suspicious and that he might be planning something. She suggested they meet at the hospital instead of following her husband. Eventually, she agreed to drive to the Moselle estate before going to the hospital to visit her ailing father-in-law. However, she was murdered before she had a chance to see him. Maggie and her youngest son were murdered at the Murdaugh family's 1,700-acre farm in Moselle, which included a house, a doghouse, a cabin, and wetlands. Maggie and Paul were shot multiple times near the doghouse. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot 5 times with a different weapon, which ballistics analysis showed was a .300 caliber round from an AR-style rifle. Alex stated that he had taken a long nap that day before visiting his dad, who suffered from dementia. He claimed he was gone for about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and when he returned, he found his wife and youngest son dead on the floor near the doghouse. Law enforcement reviewed Alex's schedule that night, and he admitted that he had taken a nap on the couch before leaving for his dad. In this case, police investigated the motive behind prominent attorney Alex's murder of his family. Investigators found a key clue. Weeks before the killings, a grand jury subpoenaed Alex's finances for an probe related to his son Paul's 2019 fatal boating accident. This may have been the primary motive. Alex is worried that all his financial wrongdoing will be exposed following a hearing scheduled for June 10, 2021. Furthermore, his law firm has uncovered his misuse of company funds. Gene Singer, the company's chief financial officer at the time, confronted Alex about the missing money on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities say the financial pressure used Alex to panic and fear that his world was falling apart. Once a prominent lawyer in South Carolina, Alex devised a bold plan to hide his financial crimes. However, these acts are gradually becoming public and drawing sympathy away from him. On July 14, 2022, 13 months after the shooting that killed his wife and son, Alex was charged with their murders. His trial commenced with charges of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The prosecution claimed that Alex used both a handgun and an AR rifle to shoot and kill his wife and son at close range. The murder weapons were never found. Alex's defense team argued that the shootings were carried out by 2 different shooters based on the weapons used. An expert witness for the defense stated that the height of the shooters could have ranged between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches, while Alex stands at 6 feet 4 inches tall, which disqualified him as a suspect. Prosecutors pointed to the gunshot evidence as indicating Alex's involvement. However, the expert witness, when questioned, acknowledged that other factors besides height could have influenced the trajectory of the bullets. The ballistics investigation determined that Maggie was shot with .300 blackout rounds from an AR-style rifle. Investigators found a box of these bullets on the Murdaugh family property. The state's attorney argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid responsibility for his financial crimes. However, Alex's attorney disputed this theory, claiming that there was no reason for Alex to divert the financial investigation away from himself and instead put himself at the center of a murder investigation. During the trial, evidence emerged suggesting that Alex was not the one who directly committed the murders that the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement, SLED, was investigating. Alex's attorney, Dick Harputlian, argued that he had an alibi for the night of the murders and had an motive to kill Maggie and their youngest son, Paul. He portrayed Alex and Maggie's marriage as one of everlasting love. However, prosecutors presented two videos of Alex from the night of the murders, taken hours apart. One was from Paul's Snapchat, and the other was from a law enforcement officer's body camera at the scene of the crime. The Snapchat footage was taken about an hour before the murders. When compared to what Alex was wearing after the incident, there was a clear discrepancy in clothing. In the Snapchat video, Alex was dressed in a blue shirt, which was different from the one he wore that was captured on the police body camera. Investigators concluded that they did not find the blue shirt they were looking for. Prosecutors believe Alex attempted to influence a key witness's testimony by asking if she remembered the shirt he was wearing the night of the incident. Alex's cell phone records showed that he was only at his mother's house for about 15 to 20 minutes. Alex's MOT. Hers caretaker also confirmed this, claiming that he only stayed for about 15 to 20 minutes before leaving. However, Alex claimed that he stayed for at least 45 minutes, and possibly as long as an hour and a half. When asked how long he stayed with his mother, Alex responded, about 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes at most. The most important piece of evidence was found on Paul's phone, which was recovered at the scene. It included a video that Paul had recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before investigators believe the murder occurred. The video was recorded in a dog kennel and featured the audio of 3 separate voices. Family and friends identified the voices as those of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This placed Alex in the vicinity of the murders, although he claimed he was never in the doghouse that night. During the 5th week of the trial, Alex took the stand and insisted that he never intended to harm his wife and son. He admitted that he had lied about his alibi, claiming that his was because he was addicted to opiates and prone to paranoia at the time. Prosecutors argued that after Alex killed his wife and son, he used his wife's phone to make several calls and send text messages to construct his alibi. Cell phone records also showed that Alex and his wife's phones locked within seconds of each other, which was presented to the jury as additional evidence. Based on data from Alex's cell phone, prosecutors noted that he engaged in a number of unusual activities during the timeframe of the murders. They claimed he attempted to conceal or destroy evidence that could link him to the case. However, Alex's attorneys countered this claim by pointing out that Alex's phone activity did not align with his wife's actions, arguing that it was impossible to conclude that he took his wife's phone after the shooting. Ultimately, the video recorded at the dog kennel provided decisive evidence that influenced the case outcome. The jury returned its verdict after 3 hours of deliberation on March 2, 2023. They found Alex guilty on all counts and sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In addition, the jury also convicted him of 2 counts of using a weapon in a violent crime, which resulted in an additional 5 years in prison. Alex pleaded guilty to 22 counts of financial crimes as part of a deal but maintained his innocence regarding the murders of his wife and son. On March 9, 2023, he filed an appeal of his double murder conviction. During the trial, Alex's attorney filed a motion for a new trial after discovering evidence of jury tampering by Rebecca Hill, a Culleton County Court clerk. Rebecca allegedly advised the jury not to believe Alex's testimony and the other evidence presented by the defense. She also allegedly pressured the jury to quickly return a guilty verdict and misrepresented key information to the judge. A hearing will be held for Alex's attorneys to present evidence and witnesses to support her claims. However, no judge has yet been selected to preside over the hearing. With Alex's appeal, more than 100 drug and financial crime charges, and multiple lawsuits pending, we can expect that more new information about Alex will be revealed in the future. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gabby Dulan. Gabby Dulan was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, a small town with a population of just over 4,000. In Scottsville, most people know each other or know someone in every family. Like many small towns, here there are very few types of entertainment. Locals primarily focused on school sports, especially football. The local school had good fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they frequently held games and competitions. Participating in these activities has become a tradition for locals, especially when their children participate. Gabby's family was typical. Her parents had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The oldest son was a member of the school football team, while Gabby participated in cheerleading. In November 2015, when Gabby was 7 years old, their town was preparing for the biggest football game of the year. Their school team was about to compete against a team from another county. And everyone was excited for this contest. Although Gabby's older brother played on the team, but she liked playing with other children more than playing games. Gabby's parents originally intended to leave her at home with their youngest son, cared for by a relative. However, Gabby convinced them to let her join them. On the evening of November 14th, they went to the school field for a game. In addition to local people, many people from a neighboring county came to support their team. Once they arrived at the stadium, Gabby saw her friends and asked her mom if she could play with them. Her mom agreed but reminded her to stay on school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers, while she ran off to meet her friends. Gabby ran back and forth to her mom a few times. After that, she ran away to play again. At one point, she visited her dad, who was in the announcement room, and asked him for some money to buy snacks at the concession stand, then she running off again. Minutes later, Gabby's friends approached her mom in the bleachers, looking worried. Her mom noticed Gabby was not with them and asked what was wrong. The girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek, and Gabby was to find them. They had hidden in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot to find Gabby, but she was nowhere to be seen. They called her name and checked all the places they had been playing earlier, but Gabby had seemingly disappeared. They then remembered that Gabby might have gone to the bleachers to find her mom, so they rushed there. Gabby's mother panicked when she discovered her daughter was missing and quickly informed her husband. He hurried off to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother headed to the concession stand, where Gabby had wanted to buy snacks, to continue her search. While searching, the parents Gabby's encountered friends and shared the news about their daughter's disappearance. Concerned, their friends joined in a search for Gabby. They thoroughly searched the area around the stadium but found no trace of Gabby. Returning to the stadium, the parents Gabby's made an announcement over the loudspeakers in hopes that she would hear it, but there was still no sign of her. As the game paused and spectators returned to their seats, they continued to ask people if they had seen Gabby, and some offered to help search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. They walked through the forest but still couldn't find Gabby. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since she disappeared, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, listened to the accounts from the parents and Gabby's friends, and they began their search. The local police department had little experience with serious cases like this, as child disappearances were rare in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario, that Gabby may have been abducted or harmed. The officers encountered a pressing issue. The suspected kidnapper was likely at the stadium, where a game was about to conclude. Realizing they had limited time before fans started leaving, which may include suspects, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. Police kept watch at all exits to stop anyone from fleeing. They decided not to inform people about the situation, to avoid causing panic, so as not to hinder their search. If people became aware that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl might be nearby, it could lead to chaos. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the surrounding area. They moved toward the baseball field and entered the woods. Deeper into the trees, they discovered a small creek where they found the body of a girl, later identified as Gabby. They called for an ambulance to transport her body to the medical examiner. A preliminary examination indicated asphyxiation due to visible marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of Gabby's clothes were also missing, making the police suspect that she had been sexually assaulted. Gabby's mother saw an ambulance near the woods and immediately thought that her daughter had been found in need of medical attention. She rushed to the scene, but was stopped by the police, who didn't want her to witness the disturbing scene they were dealing with. The police investigation had quickly turned into a murder case, so they decided to relocate everyone from the stadium to the school gym. The investigators suspected that the killer might be among the group, and they needed to identify the perpetrator as soon as possible. The investigators then informed Gabby's parents about the likely circumstances of her death. They inquired if the parents had any suspicions about the person responsible for this heinous act. Specifically, they inquired if anyone had made threats against the family or if the parents had noticed anything unusual. However, Gabby's parents stated they had no idea who could be behind this act. Then, detectives interviewing Gabby's friends to see if they had noticed anything unusual that evening. They asked if anyone had been following or watching them, but the girls didn't remember anything suspicious. Detectives also brought Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to carefully observe the people present, hoping to trigger their memory. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any significant leads. The lead detective persisted in his belief that Gabby's friends may have unknowingly seen the kidnapper. He suspected that they might have been hesitant to point him out due to fear. To aid their recall, he encouraged them to remember every detail from that evening. Eventually, one of Gabby's friends mentioned that when she hid from Gabby in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. Although the girl's memory of the man's appearance was limited, she recalled that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the ticket vendor, who confirmed seeing a man with a denim jacket draped. The vendor found this person's behavior unusual and suspected he was intoxicated. Although this new information helped, the police still couldn't identify the man. The police started questioning the people who had been at the game. As they did, it became clear why they were all being held there. They grew concerned, particularly for the safety of their children. Despite their fear, they cooperated with the police and answered their questions. To further investigate, the police cross-referenced the names of men present in the gym against a sex offenders registry, but found no matches. They also checked on sex offenders who had lived near the school, verifying their whereabouts at the time of the incident, but all of them had alibis. None of them had been near the school at the time of the incident. Several witnesses reported that they saw a man named Timothy Madden, he acting strangely near the women's restroom during the game. As a local resident, many people were familiar with him, but they stated that his behavior that evening seemed suspicious. According to these witnesses, Madden was wearing a denim jacket, which matches the description provided by one of Gabby's friends who also saw a man near the restroom. A witness who was a distant relative of Timothy reported that during the game, Timothy seemed distracted. Despite his younger son playing on the field, Timothy, who normally showed great interest in his son's sports activities, wasn't paying attention. Several other witnesses also expressed concerns about Timothy's unusual behavior, leading investigators to interrogate him. As night fell, many people had been released from the school. Before speaking with Timothy, investigators sought the local sheriff's opinion. The sheriff, who had known Timothy, doubted he was capable of committing such a crime. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children. When police went to speak with him, they knocked on his door, and he answered. The officers asked if he knew the reason for their visit, and Timothy stated he was aware of Gabby's murder, but had no involvement in it. The detectives then used a tactic to gather more information. They asked Timothy if he could explain why several eyewitnesses claimed to have recorded him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder, through videos they supposedly provided. However, the detectives had fabricated this information. Their intention was to provoke Timothy into revealing his guilt or new information if he was involved in the crime. Timothy initially claimed he had no knowledge of the events, but he quickly changed his story. He admitted to speaking to Gabby near the stadium that evening. According to Timothy, he had stepped outside to smoke when several girls ran by him. Shortly after, Gabby approached and asked if he had seen her friends, explaining they were playing hide-and-seek and she couldn't find them. Timothy directed her towards their location, and she ran off. The detectives found Timothy's rapid change in story suspicious. Furthermore, his account indicated that he had spoken to Gabby just minutes before her disappearance. Notably, at the time when they met near the stadium, there were no witnesses present, which could have provided Timothy with an opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives then inquired if Timothy could provide a reasonable explanation if his DNA was found on Gabby's body. He replied calmly that he had none. They also requested a DNA sample from Timothy and the clothing he wore at the stadium. Timothy agreed to both requests. However, when handing over his clothing to the police, they discovered suspicious stains on the pants, denim jacket, and underwear that resembled blood. When questioned about the stains, Timothy insisted they were just dirt and denied any wrongdoing. However, the police were skeptical and decided to wait for the DNA analysis results to proceed with an arrest. After several days, the forensic pathologist completed the examination of the victim's body, confirming that Gabby's cause of death was manual strangulation. The pathologist also determined that she had been brutally assaulted. A biological sample of the perpetrator was extracted and sent to the laboratory for further analysis. The day after the murder, something unexpected happened. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, claiming a suspicious person had been seen at the game. The letter provided a detailed description of the person's car, including the make and license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly track down the vehicle's owner, who was a student living about 30 minutes from Scottsville. When questioned by the police, the student denied attending the game and knowing about the murder. He claimed to have been at work that evening, and the police were able to verify his alibi. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. Despite this, the person who wrote the anonymous letter was never identified. It is unclear whether the letter was intended as a trap or a cruel joke, but it is clear that the student was innocent. Police quickly received additional clues. Several people reported suspicious behavior by a 16-year-old local boy. He had given conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the day of the game, claiming both to have been there and not to have attended. He also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. The detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. However, what they found even more alarming was that the boy had threatened his father with a knife just 2 weeks before the murder. The police wanted to question the boy further but needed his parents to be present. However, his mother refused to cooperate and wouldn't provide a DNA sample, leaving the police without any concrete evidence. As news of the police investigation into the Timothy family spread, rumors began circulating in the small town of Scottsville. Some speculated that one of Timothy's older sons could be a suspect, while others suspected Timothy himself. Gabby's parents were shocked to hear these rumors, especially since they had known Timothy Madden since childhood and were close to his family. Their children played on the same sports teams, and they would often sit together at games. Given their long-standing friendship, Gabby's parents found it difficult to imagine that anyone from their social circle could be connected to the murder. Following the spread of rumors in town, another incident occurred. The 20-year-old eldest son of the Timothy family began sending text messages to the police. He using profanity and issuing threats, insisting police stop bothering his family. He then was promptly arrested for making these threats. Further investigation revealed that there was an outstanding arrest warrant for him in another town, related to allegations of assaulting a minor. During questioning, the young man attributed his behavior to frustration over the accusations against his family. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he was at his cousin's house in a neighboring town on the evening in question. He consented to providing a DNA sample, which was then sent to the lab for analysis. On November 20th, 6 days after Gabby's murder, her funeral was held, drawing hundreds of mourners from Scottsville and surrounding towns. Everyone came together to support Gabby's parents, donating to help cover the funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the lab finished analyzing the DNA evidence, comparing it to samples from Timothy and his son. The results were conclusive. The semen on Gabby's body matched Timothy Madden's DNA, and the blood on his clothes matched Gabby's DNA. Detectives attended the funeral and discreetly informed Gabby's parents about this. At the same time, police officers arrived at Timothy's house and took him into custody. However, Timothy still maintains that he is innocent. He said the blood on his clothes was his own, the result of a scratch from a fence. This contradicted his initial testimony to police, in which he had claimed the stain was mud. With the DNA evidence in hand, the prosecution took the case to court, seeking the death penalty. During trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer maintained his client's innocence. He raised concerns about the reliability of the evidence, citing inconsistencies in the timeline. Specifically, the lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium filming a game at the time of the murder. However, Timothy himself had previously told police that he saw Gabby around the same time. The lawyer highlighted that Gabby's body was discovered in a creek, yet when Timothy returned to the stadium, his clothes were dry. Additionally, Timothy's mother, who resided with him, reported that when Timothy came home, he was wearing clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the discovery of Timothy's semen on Gabby's body made all of the defense's arguments meaningless. This evidence firmly established that Timothy was involved in the case. According to police, his account of that evening contained some truth. It is possible that Timothy did leave the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was searching for her friends. Given that Timothy was the father of one of Gabby's friends, she would have been familiar with him. Gabby may have approached Timothy to ask about the whereabouts of the other girls. At this point, Timothy might have concocted a plan, telling Gabby that the girls had gone into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to take her there. Once they were far enough from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then go back to the match. The wait for Timothy's trial had been ongoing for 4 years, causing distress for Gabby's family. They were anxious for justice to be served and for the person responsible for the murder to be held accountable. However, the case was slowed down due to many administrative procedures, leaving the family frustrated and having to wait for many years. In 2019, the prosecution and defense started negotiating a plea deal. The prosecution proposed waiving the death penalty if Timothy pleaded guilty and accepted a life sentence. Gabby's parents supported this proposal, as the prolonged wait for the trial was taking a toll on them. They also wanted to avoid the emotional pain of attending multiple hearings. Although Timothy had consistently maintained his innocence, he eventually agreed to the plea deal and confessed. However, the terms of the agreement did not require him to disclose the details of his actions. He only had to admit his guilt. This was unsatisfactory for Gabby's family, as they wanted the perpetrator to take full responsibility for his crimes and provide a complete account of what happened to their daughter. The court hearing became heated, Gabby's father yelling at Timothy and Timothy's relatives shouting at Gabby's family. The judge was forced to intervene, calling a break and separating the parties. Ultimately, Timothy was sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Heeringa. Jessica Heeringa was born on July 16, 1987, in Norton Shores, Michigan, to a humble family, and that included a sister. At 22, she had a son named Zahn with her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer, and by 25, the couple was still together and raising Zahn in a rented home. Jessica worked as a manager at a local Exxon gas station near Lake Michigan, where she was well-liked by customers for her friendly nature. She often worked extra hours to provide for Zahn, and her ambition was evident in her diary entries, which expressed her desire to pursue a college degree in accounting. However, financial constraints prevented her from achieving this goal. Dakota, her partner and the father of her child, was unable to fully support their family, leading to disagreements, and their relationship was strained. Despite being engaged, their wedding plans were repeatedly delayed due to various circumstances. On April 26, 2013, she started the day by shopping at a nearby store around 3 p.m. and then drove to work. Arriving at 4:35 p.m., Jessica began her night shift at the Exxon gas station. As she began her shift, she was the only employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called 911 to report a strange situation at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas but found no one to take his payment. The store was unattended, with the door open and lights on. The customer informed the dispatcher 911, "The store is empty, but there are 2 cars parked outside, mine and another one. It looks unusual." Police officers arrived at the Exxon gas station about 10 minutes after the call. They inspected the petrol station and found no signs of a struggle or disturbance. Everything was in order. Inside the store, police discovered Jessica's coat and purse, containing $400, and her car and house keys, in the back room. A single drop of Jessica's blood was found near the back door. Police also found a cap from a Walther P.22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 watch batteries on the floor. The cash register was intact, with all the money still in it. The last transaction was recorded at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. Unfortunately, the gas station did not have interior surveillance cameras. Jessica's pack of cigarettes was left on the counter next to the cash register, suggesting she had temporarily stepped away. Her car was locked and parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. She had mysteriously vanished. The police discovered that the gas station was unattended, so they contacted the owner and informed her. The owner then asked a nearby manager to come to the gas station for protection. The police also notified Jessica's family that she was missing. Her parents began searching for clues and called her friends to see if they had any information. One friend reported being at the gas station around 8 to 9 p.m. that day and said everything seemed normal. However, a fellow employee who arrived to close the station shortly after recalled a suspicious incident. Around 11 p.m., the employee and her boyfriend drove by the station on a motorcycle and saw a silver Chrysler Town Country minivan parked near the back door with its door open. They initially thought Jessica might be involved in a theft, so they kept watching. The employee saw a young man with disheveled wavy hair and an orange sweatshirt near the minivan. He repeatedly opened and closed the rear door before driving away. Further investigation revealed a surveillance video from a nearby building showing a silver Chrysler passing the Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. The police also spoke to Christian, who reported seeing the man in the minivan talking to Jessica earlier. Christian initially believed the man was just flirting with Jessica because of her attractiveness. A composite sketch of the suspect in Jessica's disappearance was created with the help of Christian, who had seen the man near a minivan. The suspect was described as a young male with light skin, dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 6 feet tall. 3 days after Jessica went missing, the sketch was released. In spite of, police received many calls, but no information was available that helped the case. A main issue in the investigation was the large number of silver Chrysler minivans in the United States. Specifically, in Michigan, there were 15,000 registered vehicles of the same kind. This made it difficult to identify the driver of the minivan related to Jessica's disappearance. Jessica Heeringa's boyfriend, Dakota, was initially suspected in her disappearance due to their frequent arguments. However, Dakota denied this and cooperated with the investigation, stating he was at home with their son on the night of her disappearance. Since Dakota didn't have a car, he couldn't have gone to her workplace, and his phone records confirmed his alibi. After verifying his story, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. Further investigation revealed that Jessica's friendly and outgoing personality helped her attract many admirers. Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber, was one such admirer. On the evening of her disappearance, around 9:30 p.m., Jess visited Jessica at the gas station, confessed his feelings, and claimed he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He then left the station, called his wife, and spoke with her for about 50 minutes before returning home. After undergoing a polygraph test and being interrogated and interviewed along with his wife, the police also cleared Jess Ammerman as a suspect. Rob Fallett, the brother of the manager at the Exxon gas station, where Jessica worked, was initially considered a suspect in her disappearance. Around 9 p.m. on the day she vanished, Rob visited the station and reported that Jessica appeared upset. When he asked her what was wrong, she shared that she was having family problems. Rob offered to let her stay with him, but she declined the offer. Fallett then left to go night fishing in a nearby lake. After investigating Rob's alibi, detectives discovered his phone records supported his claim and he was cleared of the crime. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched with helicopters, specially trained dogs, and thorough searches of homes, businesses, wells, wooded areas, and Lake Michigan. However, no leads were found, causing the case to reach a standstill. About a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A young woman with a similar appearance to Jessica was kidnapped and attacked by a man while walking home late at night. She was taken to his apartment, where she was attacked, and her life was threatened. The woman was eventually released after several hours. The suspect, 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was eventually found by police, but he resisted arrest, threatening officers with a fake gun. Then, he was fatally shot during the confrontation. Brad had a history of crime, including being convicted of kidnapping in 2004 and arrested for indecent exposure in 2011. In 2014, he lived in a dorm near the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. Despite this, investigators couldn't find any evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica disappeared, a similar incident happened in 2016. A young woman was walking home from a friend's party late at night when she got lost on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan stopped and asked if she was okay, offering to give her a ride. She refused the ride but asked to use his phone. The man agreed, but only if she got into the minivan. Once she was inside, he locked the door, said his phone was dead, and he pulled out his gun, asked her to keep quiet. Then he started driving. The woman was feeling extremely unwell and nauseated, so she asked the driver to roll down the window for her. She quickly took advantage of the opportunity and jumped out of the moving vehicle through the window, running to a nearby house for safety. The driver quickly sped away and escaped. The victim immediately called the police and provided a detailed description of her kidnapper. By examining footage from nearby surveillance cameras, the police were able to identify the license plate number of the vehicle, a silver Chrysler Town & Country. The investigation eventually identified the driver as Jeffrey Willis, 46 years old. Jeffrey Willis, a factory worker, lived a reclusive and humble life, with no criminal record. When police found and searched his minivan, they discovered a semi-automatic Walther P22 pistol. It was discovered that this pistol had been reported stolen by a coworker of Jeffrey some time ago. Jeffrey was arrested and taken into custody. Upon searching his residence, police found a collection of various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching the Walther P22 pistol. They also discovered medical supplies and sedatives, which included insulin syringes with unknown substances and disposable gloves. Investigators found a diagram of the woman's body, with some parts marked. Upon examining his computer, several distressing videos were found, showing scenes of young women being kidnapped. A hidden hard drive discovered in a ventilation duct contained secretly recorded footage of Jeffrey's female neighbors swimming. Furthermore, on his computer, police discovered a folder labeled Victims that included 2 subfolders. The first subfolder was named after missing woman Jessica, and the second subfolder contained information about a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Blech, a 36-year-old woman who suffered a tragic fate. Approximately 1 year after Jessica went missing, Rebecca was murdered on June 29, 2014. Rebecca had gone out for a run in the evening but never returned home. She was discovered by her neighbors lying on the road, with her clothing disheveled. Initially, it was believed that she had been hit by a car. Although Rebecca was unconscious, she still had a pulse when found. Emergency services were immediately called, but unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries before she could be saved. Autopsy reports later revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of Rebecca's death, the suspect has not yet been identified. However, 2 years after Jeffrey's arrest, investigators uncovered new evidence linking Rebecca's murder to the handgun found in his small truck. Prosecutors alleged that Jeffrey had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her back to his home, but when Rebecca resisted, he shot her and fled the scene. Despite his denial, forensic analysis discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove found in Jeffrey's residence. As a result, he was convicted of Rebecca's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, Jeffrey faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica, despite he consistently denying any involvement in her disappearance. Nonetheless, a review of his phone records revealed that he was present at the Exxon gas station where Jessica was last seen on the night she vanished. He then went to his grandfather's house, about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at that house, they discovered something surprising. Although the front door was secured with heavy locking, the police were able to break in easily. What they discovered was disturbing. In the basement, they found a large stash of cleaning supplies, including various powders and bleaches, that had all been manufactured in early 2013, around the same time Jessica disappeared. It was found that Jeffrey had been absent from his job on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues reported that his absence was unusual. When he returned to work a few days later, he had noticeable deep scratches on his face and hands. This has made people who know him suspicious. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25, the evening before Jessica vanished, contacted the police. She had arrived at the station late that evening and expressed her concern to Jessica about being alone at such a late hour. Jessica acknowledged her concern with a nod. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station overheard the conversation and reassured the visitor, saying, "Don't worry, Jessica has customers who look after her." The man then left the gas station. Despite the stranger's reassurance, the visitor remained concerned about Jessica's safety and waited in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Unfortunately, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey as the unknown man, recalling his presence at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Jeffrey had frequently visited the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica at least 15 times prior to her disappearance. Kevin Bloom, a 48-year-old prison guard and Jeffrey's cousin, was arrested. During questioning, Kevin's statements were inconsistent, ultimately leading him to confess. He revealed details about Rebecca's death that were not publicly known at the time, and also admitted to helping Jeffrey hide Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him to a party at his house. When Kevin arrived, he found Jessica lying lifeless and bound on the floor. Kevin and Jeffrey wrapped Jessica's body in a sheet and drove to a forest, where Jeffrey had already dug a grave. They buried Jessica and then returned home. When the police asked Kevin to take them to the burial site, he had difficulty remembering the exact location. Despite searching the forest for a while, he was unable to pinpoint the spot where they had buried Jessica's body. The trial of Jeffrey began, even though Jessica's body had not been found. The prosecution presented strong evidence to charge Jeffrey with kidnapping and murder. They alleged that he had been stalking Jessica for a long time. On April 26, 2013, Jeffrey allegedly parked near the gas station's entrance, went inside, and hit Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jessica's blood was flowing to the floor. Jeffrey then allegedly dragged she out through the exit, put her in the back seat of his car, and drove her to his late grandfather's house. Forensic analysis of Jeffrey's devices revealed that he saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. As investigators followed the case, they found that he used a password that included her initials and the date April 27, 2013. This suggests that April 27, 2013, was likely the day she died, one day after her disappearance. Jeffrey maintained his innocence, claiming he was at home on the night Jessica was kidnapped. His lawyers pointed out that there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime, and no DNA evidence belonging to Jessica was found in his home or vehicle. Jeffrey's defense team argued that Jessica had been struggling with serious substance abuse problems in the time before her disappearance, suggesting that her kidnapping might be connected to her involvement in the illicit drug trade. Despite his claims of innocence, Jeffrey was found guilty of murdering Jessica and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions. Willis's cousin, Kevin Blom, was also found guilty of helping to dispose of Jessica's body and received a sentence of 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Years after Jeffrey's conviction, new information came to light that implicated him in an older, unsolved case. On October 17, 1996, the body of Angela Thorberg was found in Fruitport, Michigan, with her killer never identified. After further investigation, Ed Blom, a 1988 high school graduate and Kevin Blom's father, was linked to the murder of Angela Thorberg in 1996. However, later evidence suggested that it was Jeffrey who became a suspect in Angela Thorberg's death. It has been 10 years since Jessica went missing, but her body has still not been found. After her disappearance, a court battle took place over the custody of Jessica and Dakota's son, Zon. Jessica's husband, Dakota, sought custody, but ultimately lost the case to Jessica's family. Zahn currently lives with his grandparents and relatives on his father's side. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jason Corbett. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old Irish businessman, Jason has a warm, friendly personality. Born in Limerick, Ireland, Jason has a twin brother named Wayne and an older sister named Tracy. He married Margaret Fitzpatrick in 2003 when he was 27. They later welcomed 2 children, a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah, whom they loved dearly. Jason's family seemed to be living a happy life in Ireland, but this happiness was short-lived. Tragedy struck in 2006, shortly after Sarah was born. Margaret suffered a severe asthma attack one night, waking Jason up because she was having trouble breathing. Jason immediately tried to help her by giving her medication and using her inhaler, but her condition quickly worsened. In a panic, Jason called an ambulance, but unfortunately, Margaret died on the way to the hospital. Jason Corbett was the director of a small packaging company in Ireland when he lost his wife, leaving him to raise his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter alone. His friends witnessed his deep sadness and struggled to cope with the loss. A year after his wife's death, Jason was looking for a nanny and housekeeper to care for his children. This led him to Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. In March 2008, Molly moved from the United States to Ireland to take up a nanny job. A friend of Jason's accompanied him to the airport to pick Molly up. The friend immediately became concerned that Molly might not be suitable for the job. Molly's youthful appearance, flashy style, and heavy makeup aroused suspicion. With her bright jacket, cowboy boots, curly hair, and heavy makeup, Molly looks more like a stage performer than a responsible nanny and maid. Molly was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. After attending Clemson University for a while, she dropped out and decided to start a new life in Ireland. There, she worked as a nanny for Jason's family, taking care of his 2 children, Jack and Sarah. Molly immediately took to the children, showing them care and concern. Jason's friends noticed a significant change in him. He seemed to be coming back to life after a period of grief. As Molly and Jason's relationship deepened, love blossomed and they began dating. The family of 4 went on vacations together, which brought them closer together. They began to plan for their future as a family. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason took Molly to a coffee shop, where he proposed to her with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly immediately began planning their wedding in the United States. She also convinced Jason to leave Ireland and move to the United States with her, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house, moved to the United States for work, and the family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina. The couple married in a beautiful ceremony attended by friends and family from both the United States and Ireland. After the wedding, Molly worked as a swimming instructor. But her main focus was raising Jack and Sarah. Jason, on the other hand, worked as a manager in the United States. At first, their life seemed perfect, but as time went on, their marriage began to fall apart. On August 1, 2015, Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited Jason's family home, where he greeted them at the entrance and helped them with their luggage. Tom had brought a gift for Jason's son, Jack, a baseball bat, but Jack was out with friends at the time. Instead, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together, eating pizza. Jack returned home late that night, but Tom decided to wait until the next morning to give him the baseball bat. After 11 p.m., the family went to bed. Molly and Jason were in the master bedroom on the first floor, while their children, Jack and Sarah, were in nearby rooms. Molly's parents were upstairs in the living room. Hours later, at 3 a.m., Molly's father, Tom, called 911 in a panic. He claimed that Jason had attacked his daughter, Molly, and in response, Tom had hit Jason with a baseball bat. Jason was now unconscious and bleeding. During the call, Tom expressed his fear that Jason's severe head injuries could be fatal and urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Tom asked the 911 operator for help, and she instructed Tom and Molly to perform CPR to try to revive Jason until paramedics arrived. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found Molly in the yard near a car, looking distressed and shocked but not crying. Inside the house, they discovered Jason Corbett's body in the master bedroom, surrounded by blood splattered on the bed, walls, and floor. Tom and Molly both had blood on their clothes. A baseball bat and a large pebble with blood on them were found near Jason, along with an overturned lamp. Jack and Sarah had been sleeping in their room during the incident. At the police station, Tom Martins, 66, a 30-year veteran of the FBI, stated that his son-in-law was mentally unstable and had been abusing his daughter. According to Tom, Jason had been drunk that night. Everyone had gone to bed, but Tom was awakened in the middle of the night by screams and loud voices coming from downstairs. He quickly got out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran down the stairs. When Tom entered the master bedroom, he found Jason strangling Molly with both hands. Tom yelled, "Let her go." In response, Jason turned to him and said, "I'm going to kill her." Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death but claimed they had acted in self-defense. Tom immediately felt the need to protect himself and those around him. He swung the baseball bat at Jason, but the blows seemed to have no effect. When Jason tried to drag Molly into the bathroom, Tom intervened, trying to stop him. The situation worsened when Jason pushed Tom, causing him to fall and his glasses to fly off. At this point, Tom felt his life was in danger. Jason then spotted the baseball bat on the floor and reached for it. Molly quickly responded by grabbing a rock and hitting Jason in the head, yelling, "Don't touch my dad," as she did so. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tom picked up the baseball bat and repeatedly hit Jason until he fell to the floor. Molly, 32, provided a consistent account of events during her interview. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up with a nightmare that night, which caused Jason to become angry and attack her. Jason allegedly began strangling Molly, threatening to kill her, and her father intervened to protect her. In order to protect her father, Molly claimed to have hit Jason on the head with a heavy rock. When asked where she got the rock, Molly replied that she had placed it on her bedside table. The rock had originally been used for drawing pictures with children as part of a gardening project, but Molly could not remember exactly how many times she had hit Jason, describing the incident as a desperate fight for her life. During her interview, Molly told police that she was still in pain from the alleged strangling incident. Photos of Molly, which showed a red mark in the middle of her neck, were compared to photos taken of her when she was arrested. However, the comparison did not reveal any red marks on her neck at the time of her arrest. Molly later admitted that the fight with her husband had actually occurred the day before the tragedy, in which Jason had grabbed her arm and neck. During questioning, she repeatedly complained of a sore throat. Both Molly and her father, Tom, testified that Jason had abused his wife, but Jason's family disputed these claims. Jason's sister, Tracy, noticed that Molly was controlling of Jason, often becoming upset if things did not go her way. She also noticed that Molly did not want to socialize with Jason's family members when they visited. Additionally, one of Molly's friends shared a disturbing claim that Molly had claimed to be friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until her death. However, this contradicted the family's account, as they knew Margaret had died of an asthma attack, not cancer. Despite Jason's relatives' warnings and attempts to intervene about Molly's unusual behavior, the wedding still takes place, marking the beginning of a complicated and troubled marriage. Over time, Molly's behavior began to raise concerns. Jason noticed a major change in her personality and suspected that she might have mental health issues. She was initially kind and loving, but now seemed manipulative and controlling. This worried Jason and led to more problems in their relationship. Molly began distancing herself from Jason's family by cutting her phone calls to just seconds. Before her death, Jason took steps to protect his children, Jack and Sarah. He named his sister, Tracy, as their legal guardian in case anything happened to him. Tracy knew that if Jason died, Molly would have custody of the children. After Jason's death, Tracy traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, preparing for a legal battle with Molly. During her troubled marriage to Jason, Molly consulted with an attorney to understand her rights to Jason's children in the event of a divorce. The lawyer suggested that she record their arguments and gather evidence that could be used against Jason. As a result, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared unresponsive, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions as his voice grew louder. After Jason's death, Molly confided in a close friend about her marital problems, describing Jason as controlling and abusive. She accused him of forcing her to have sex, verbally abusing her, and becoming increasingly aggressive toward her over time. Despite this, Molly never reported Jason's behavior to the police. For days after Jason's death, his 10-year-old son Jack and 8-year-old daughter Sarah were interviewed by a child welfare specialist. During the conversation, they shared their thoughts about their parents' relationship. The children described seeing their mother, Molly, being careful not to wake their father, Jason, for fear of him getting angry. Jack described a pebble on his parents' bedside table, explaining that they had brought it in because it was raining and planned to decorate it later. Both Jack and Sarah described witnessing arguments between them. According to the children, their father, Jason, often initiated these arguments, which included hitting, pushing, and swearing at his mother, Molly, over trivial matters. Jason's autopsy report found that he died of traumatic brain injury. He had suffered approximately 12 severe blows to the head with a baseball bat and a rock, all concentrated in the same area. The injuries were so severe that his scalp was torn away from his skull and his skull was fractured. A toxicology report found that Jason's blood alcohol level was slightly higher than normal at the time of his death. He also had traces of trazodone, an antidepressant commonly prescribed to treat insomnia, in his body. Jason was buried in his hometown of Limerick, Ireland, next to his first wife, Margaret. After Jason's death, his sister, Tracy, took their children, Jack and Sarah, to Ireland, which left Molly shocked and heartbroken. She tried to contact Jack and Sarah by phone and social media. Molly and Tom claimed they acted in self-defense against Jason, but the investigation into his death continues. Tracy has another theory. She thinks Molly killed Jason because he planned to leave her and take their children. Tracy believes that Jason told Molly about his decision on the night of the incident, and Molly, afraid of being alone, reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah slowly adjust to their new lives. 9 months after their father's death, they revealed that they were forced to lie about domestic violence. They admit that Molly made up stories about their father's violent behavior, threatening to cut them off if they did not comply. The children clarify that their father had never abused Molly, contrary to what they had initially said. During the investigation, Molly's past relationship with her ex-husband Keith Megan came to light. Keith shared some revealing details about Molly's past. The two met on a dating website and quickly fell in love, moving in together just 6 weeks later. Keith described Molly as independent, fun-loving, carefree and unconventional. However, she eventually confided in him about her struggles with bipolar disorder. Keith was not overly concerned by the revelation, as Molly was on medication and appeared to be fine, apart from occasional changes in her behavior when she missed a dose. These changes did not manifest as violence or outbursts, but rather as clingy behavior during arguments, such as refusing to let Keith leave. Additionally, Molly would often spend hours in the bath, followed by periods of sitting on the cold floor and crying. Despite the difficulties they faced, Keith and Molly continued their life together and decided not to have children at that time. However, Molly soon revealed that she was pregnant, which took Keith by surprise. As the sole breadwinner, Keith was struggling financially and did not feel ready to become a father. Keith eventually proposed to Molly and she happily accepted, but due to her health problems, Molly continued to take prescription medication, including antidepressants, sometimes up to 16 pills a day. This caused Keith to worry about the effects of the medication on their unborn child. In a tragic turn of events, Molly had a dream that she had lost her baby, and the next day the hospital confirmed that the fetus had died. The loss put further strain on their relationship. Molly fell into a state of grief and was diagnosed with major depression. Her parents began to view Keith negatively, seeing him as the cause of Molly's problems. Molly planned to leave Keith in the United States to find work as a nanny for the family in Europe. In March 2008, she packed her things and moved out of the apartment they were sharing. 10 days later, she called Keith, telling him that she was in Ireland, had found a job, and was doing well. This was the last time they spoke. Years later, in October 2015, Keith received an email from a police officer in North Carolina revealing that Molly had kept her relationship with Keith and her move to Europe a secret. The email informed Keith that Molly's new husband, Jason Corbett, had been murdered. When Keith watched an interview with Molly and her father, Tom, they described Jason as a cruel person, but Keith did not believe their story. He thought their feelings seemed fake. In January 2016, Tom and Molly were charged with second-degree murder in Jason's death. At their trial in July 2017, Tom and Molly claimed they had acted in self-defense when they killed Jason. Tom said he had tried everything he could to keep himself and Molly safe. Tom admitted to beating Jason with a baseball bat, only stopping when he was sure Jason was no longer a threat. However, the prosecution argued that the severity of the attack showed a deep hatred for Jason rather than self-defense. Analysis of the bloodstains showed that some of the blows were delivered when Jason's head was between 30 and 50 centimeters above the ground, suggesting that Tom continued to attack even after Jason was no longer a threat. The presence of stains on Molly's nightgown near the area where Jason was struck suggests that she was nearby during the attack. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young testified about the injuries he observed on Tom and Molly on the night of the incident. He stated that Molly had self-inflicted wounds to her neck, telling her to stop while he was taking notes on her injuries. Other than some dried blood on her face and hair, Lieutenant Young found no other injuries on Molly. Tom also had no injuries, only blood on his watch and under his fingernails. Notably, his glasses were not broken. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also took the stand and described what she found when she arrived at the scene. When she examined Jason's body, she found that his torso was cold to the touch and had patches of dried blood. This contradicts Molly's statement that they called 911 immediately after Jason became unconscious. The police investigation discovered that Jason had a life insurance policy, with Molly listed as the beneficiary. Furthermore, it was revealed that Jason had financially supported Molly's parents. A neighbor of Jason's family testified at the trial. He recalled spending an evening with Jason, from 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., drinking beer together. According to the neighbor, Jason seemed very relaxed at the time. The neighbor also witnessed Tom and his wife arriving at Jason's house, and noted that Jason warmly welcomed them and helped them carry heavy luggage into the house. After 9 days of witness testimony, listening to arguments, and viewing haunting crime scene photos, the jury reached a verdict within 3 hours. The court found Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, guilty of second-degree murder. Molly was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while her father was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Molly turned to her mother, expressing remorse. "Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Buchanan family." Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she applied for a job as an office manager at his company. At the time, Adam was divorced and raising his son, Nolan, from a previous marriage on his own. The cheerful and outgoing Molly quickly caught Adam's attention. Their mutual interests led to a romance that blossomed into a serious relationship, and eventually, Molly moved in with Adam. Molly became pregnant and their baby was named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a loving family of four. The patriarch of the family owned a construction company, and they purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The rustic cabin had no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, became actively involved in renovating it, and the family began visiting regularly. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department were called to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, located on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. When they arrived, they found that the fire had burned 10 acres of land, and while the cabin was still smoldering, it was completely destroyed. Fire department personnel found charred remains in the ashes. The fire scene was still intact, and at 11 a.m., firefighters contacted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. At the time, no one understood the severity of the situation. Firefighters suspected that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped inside the house. When they arrived, the rest of the house was still smoldering, making it impossible to check inside. They had to wait for the fire to go out and the temperature to drop. While investigating the house, police officers detected an odor similar to that of burning flesh. Police later found a human skull and a charred torso, indicating that a tragedy had occurred. Police called for backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived to thoroughly investigate the scene. It became clear that the small, isolated cabin was not the owner's primary residence, but rather a vacation home. A Dodge pickup truck and trailer were discovered on a plot of land near the cabin. Police obtained the license plate number to identify the owner, who may have been affected by the wildfire. It was quickly determined that the truck and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, owned by Adam Buchanan. He lived approximately 160 miles away, in Bonita, California. Police were unsure whether the person inside was Adam Buchanan or someone else. The name of the company owner provided police with their first lead into the investigation. The Bonita police were tasked with checking on the welfare of all members of the Buchanan family. They arrived at the address and parked in the Buchanan driveway, where they saw a white Ford pickup truck. When the officers knocked on the door, Nolan, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage, answered. He was surprised to see the officers in uniform and asked why they were there. In order to avoid alarming anyone in the house, the officers decided to first determine who was inside. Nolan explained that his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to their estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were expected back that evening. According to Nolan, his father had left him in charge of the house. Police did not yet have enough evidence to confirm that the remains found in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information they gathered, along with the discovery of what they believed to be 2 human remains on the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing from the El Dorado County fire. The following day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to the Nolan home to conduct more in-depth interviews and identify the victims of the fire. At the home, officers spoke with Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They mentioned that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, had been coming to the cabin to do repairs himself. The parents were very concerned because they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until that time. From their statements, officers learned that the home was equipped with a generator, but that there was no electricity at the time of the incident. There were also gas tanks inside. This led to two possible explanations: the fire could have been accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire had cooled, allowing police to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office reported finding new remains, which changed the direction of the investigation. Police discovered a skull fragment with a bullet hole. At that point, it was clear that a homicide had occurred, and according to the sheriff, it could no longer be considered an accidental fire. The remains were collected and sent for DNA testing. In the first set of remains, a bullet was found lodged in the victim's thigh. The bullet-riddled skull was identified as that of a child. There was now no doubt that the fire had been used to cover up the crime. Police initially focused on whether anyone in his profession might have had a grudge against him. They also looked into Molly's life to see if she had any enemies who might have committed the crime. When those leads proved fruitless, police began looking into Molly and Adam's marital problems, which uncovered more problems. Police discovered that Molly and Adam's relationship had deteriorated significantly over time and that at the time of the murders, they had been sleeping in separate rooms for some time. A diary belonging to Molly detailed instances of abuse by Adam. Witnesses reported that Adam had not only abused Molly, but also abused children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, expressed to police that she feared that the couple might seriously harm each other during their arguments. Although Molly did not end her relationship with Adam, she would occasionally leave with her son to stay at her parents' house, returning after a few days until the next argument. It was also revealed that the couple enjoyed hunting in the area near their vacation home. Since both were armed, the police hypothesized that during an argument, one of them picked up a gun and shot the other, then, realizing the seriousness of the situation, committed suicide. There was a notable contradiction. If the tragedy had been caused by a conflict between husband and wife, there should have been a weapon found near one of them. However, no weapon was found. The police thought that the weapon might have been destroyed in the fire, making identification more difficult. For 5 days, members of the forensic team meticulously sifted through the ashes of the house. Despite a thorough search, they did not find any weapons. At this point, the medical examiner confirmed that the DNA found on the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son Gavin. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the shot made it unlikely that they had committed suicide. The absence of a gun suggested that a 4th person had been present in the home who had shot the Buchanans, prompting a complete reopening of the investigation. Police turned to the victim's 16-year-old son, Nolan. He told police that the family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. Nolan explained that his father had chosen to use the company truck instead of their personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded it with rocks for landscaping near their country cabin. The truck was later found near the burned-out cabin. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, he explained, as he had in his first interview, that he needed to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that a neighbor was illegally planting trees on the edge of the Buchanan property, which led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor. His father would often demand that the neighbor stop planting trees and threaten to call the police. Nolan spoke about the difficulties of the family business, revealing that the company was facing serious financial problems. The company was downsizing, with only 5 employees remaining. According to his father, debts were mounting rapidly. The investigation identified a suspect, a neighbor. The main problem was that no one could identify which neighbors were involved. The police went door to door, interviewing homeowners in the area. This approach paid off when they found a man who confirmed that he had argued with Adam about growing an illegal crop. However, he claimed that the disagreement ended after a tense conversation and that he had an alibi. After confirming the neighbor's alibi, the police investigated the family's financial situation as their business was struggling. On September 18th, police went to Adam's company to talk to the employees. Nolan's words were correct. The company was in dire straits, facing bankruptcy with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, several employees were fired. Several of these former employees were very unhappy about being fired, making them potential suspects in the case. This aspect provided an important lead for the police. Over the weekend, the local high school held a community cleanup day. Students worked to clear debris from a park located about a mile from Adam's construction company. During the cleanup on September 19th, they discovered a small wallet containing Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's wallets and identification cards hidden under one of the bushes. There was also a .22 caliber rifle nearby. Police were dispatched to the scene immediately. The county sheriff's office has since developed a new theory. The suspect may have used the rifle to kill the Buchanans and, to conceal the crime, removed their identification from the scene. This finding is significant because it suggests that someone traveled from Bonita to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the evidence and the weapon. This suspect is likely a Bonita resident. The location of the evidence near Buchanan Construction supports the idea that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Police have sent the gun and bag of documents for analysis and are seeking a search warrant for the company's records and premises. During their search, police accessed a video surveillance camera located on the company's premises. Fortunately, the camera focused on the parking lot, not the company's premises. Surveillance footage showed the family had left town on Friday, so police reviewed footage from that day. They were surprised to see that Adam had hooked up a trailer full of rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had claimed. Police discovered that Nolan had deliberately interfered with the investigation. If the white Ford had pulled the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the Buchanan family's driveway. Police decided to interview Nolan again. Nolan repeated his account of the weekend, where he had been, and who he had met, but this time they also asked him about the movie he had seen at the theater and how he had paid for his shopping at the mall. When asked how he paid for dessert on their date, Nolan said he used his father's credit card. Police then obtained a search warrant for Buchanan's Bonita home, inspected his vehicles and reviewed his financial records. They found a Ford parked in the driveway, which they carefully inspected. They noticed red dirt on the tires, which matched the dirt found in Greenwood. If the Ford had made the trip the previous weekend or earlier, some dirt might have remained. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed the tire tracks near the cabin, but the accumulation of dirt suggested the car may have been in Greenwood recently. Officers tracked the bank card transactions and discovered that Adam Buchanan used his credit card at Taco Bell on Friday, September 11th, while traveling to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he was home, not with his parents, and had a credit card with him. Police went to the diner and reviewed security footage, confirming their suspicions. A white Ford was seen instead of a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt from September 11th showing 4 drinks purchased, not 3. Additionally, evidence at the scene of the fire showed the presence of 4 drink cups, confirming that Nolan had been in the car. The next credit card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club bar in Buchanan, about 30 minutes from the cabin. Adam's parents had alerted detectives to the bar, saying their son and daughter-in-law often went there after working on renovating the cabin. Security cameras recorded the moment the couple left the bar, and highway traffic cameras tracked their route. A Ford F-150 was seen heading toward the Buchanan cabin at 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and then driving in the opposite direction at 3:30 a.m. In the first instance, cameras captured Adam and Molly in the car. In the second, only Nolan was recorded. Hours later, on the morning of Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used at 3 locations owned by Bonita, Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to police that Buchanan had only one bank card. This information contradicted Nolan's accounts. At this time, forensic results showed that Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested in the classroom. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and attempted to twist the story by claiming that his father had shot his family. He said his father had pointed a gun at him, and in self-defense he took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan maintained that it was self-defense, claiming that the fire and his subsequent lies were due to his panic and extreme fear. He explained that he had doused the house with gasoline and set it on fire to cover it up. The defense repeatedly pointed to Adam's abusive behavior toward his son and other family members to the jury. The medical examiner raised doubts about the verdict, noting that the gunshot wound to Gavin's skull indicated it was fired at a nearly 90-degree angle. Nolan, meanwhile, claimed that he and his brother's beds were next to each other and that they were both awakened by noises and screams. At that point, Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at Nolan, who was able to push the attacker away. According to this account, the shot would have come from about a 45-degree angle, which is inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution believes Nolan shot his younger brother Gavin while they were home alone, as their parents were at a bar. After waiting for their father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. The position of the bodies suggested that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took his rifle, his parents' papers, poured gasoline over the bodies, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her to establish his alibi. On July 13, 2018, a jury convicted Nolan Buchanan of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years.